Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Not evening, afternoon. I would like to now call our special council meeting of Monday, October the 21st to order, please. As we begin today, I'd like to remind everyone that we are having this meeting on the lands of the Sooke Nation. So council, I'll now turn your attention to the agenda. I see that 4.1 is our Sooke RCMP quarterly report. So our staff have reached out to the base commanders. So what I would like to do is that should he be able to make this meeting, that we will pivot and have his presentation upon arrival. May be busy in other matters, but otherwise we'll leave it for now and then come to it should that be possible. So if I could have approval of today's agenda. Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Beddoes. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And just a reminder, we are sitting in a special council meeting, not a committee of the whole. So regular meeting protocols apply in this case. So we'll move right into public question and comment period, which is item 5 for anyone here that would like to speak on the agenda. If you could please come forward, yes, and introduce yourself and turn on the microphone. We just require your name, please, for the record.
On?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Heather Phillips. I'm a resident of Otter Point and a neighbor to Beddoes. I will comment on the district's strategic plan. That's item 6.3. Make sure to acquire, develop, and protect parks for the residents of Sooke. Parks are an essential service. Before the district of Sooke was incorporated from the Sooke electoral area, residents and visitors used private raw land and crown land as if it were parkland. In 2024, access to private raw land is almost non-existent. We do have federal, provincial, and regional parks in our area, but they are in danger of overuse. The district has many small, underused pieces of parkland. The vision for the future should include viable, usable, and valuable community parks. Nature parks are ideal because they require little maintenance and to some degree retain ecological systems. The district's budget for parks has been slim, and the development cost charges levied for parks is a very small part of the cost of development in the district. I think that should change. There's a sad example of how things can go wrong at the headwaters of Ella Stream. The development now referred to as Viewpoint Estates has grown from a proposal put forward in 2012. Provincial acts had to be considered. The proposal included that in accordance with the Local Government Act, the developer would provide parkland and not cash. In accordance with the Riparian Protection Act, the proposal included a riparian assessment for Ella Stream and a protection plan. As seems to be a common practice, the land dedicated for parks was closely aligned with the area for stream protection. It is clear that in the 12 years intervening, things have gone wrong. What was outlined for stream protection in the 2012 plan and what we have today is very different. This has affected the area and the quality of the park's dedication. The district was to have nature parks. There's very little natural that is left. It seems over time that what the developers wanted had priority over what the residents need or what the province and the district required. We can't go back. We can learn and go forward. I suggest that the district improve its parks budget by increasing the development cost charges for parks. Identify desirable parcels to be purchased. There are still natural areas within the district that could be acquired. The recent successful purchase of the Wanda Fuca Electoral Area Community Park, known as the Admiral's Forest, was due to the generosity of the property owner. The owners of the Viewpoint Estates could contribute generously to the district's parks budget, since the original park dedication for that development has gone sideways. Individuals and not-for-profit organizations gave money to purchase the Admiral's Forest.
Sorry, excuse me, we are at time. I may ask you to wrap up as it's 2 minutes per speaker.
Okay, the district can accept donations for its parks budget, and the district of Sooke needs its own natural area parks for local residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have other speakers here today?
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Strongwind. I'm a resident of Sooke. And I just wanted to touch base on the strategic plan as well, and further to item 7.5 in my letter to council of September 20th, 2024. I would like to urge council to pause the adoption of the strategic plan as it is presented because of a serious gap of Indigenous representation and collaboration, except for a vague reference to the item of sustainable growth and environmental stewardship with Sauk Nation land use planning and MOU. I just wanted to add that we need to have a thoughtful and proactive approach to planning that includes Indigenous and First Peoples perspectives to be an Indigenous community. Miigwech.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers today? This is the only time on the agenda for public input, so.
My name is Alan Kind. I live in Sooke. I would also like to talk to parks and park dedication. Looking at what has happened up on Broom Hill with Viewpoint Estates in that development. They were allowed to go ahead at their own peril. And then it was discovered several months later that their peril had taken them across the stream, across parkland. The parkland was to be riparian. It was part of section C in the map that was supposed to be an untouched riparian parkland. And it sits as it is today. I think I would like to suggest to the council that they look ahead to what large developers want to do and get the types of research done or investigations done that will say, this is what this property is, this is what it can be used for, and this is how it can be augmented. Because it's looking like that there is no area up there that hasn't been augmented. The riparian zones, both in phase 6 on the upper staircase onto the top, and then phase 8 down over the back. It's got to be 150 feet down the back now to where they want to put a playground. It is nowhere near what they had suggested to the residents of Sooke in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Okay, so I believe that's it for members of the public speaking today. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll carry on into our report section, and the item up first, 6.1, interim housing needs report introduction, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Holden Blue. I'm the senior planner here, one of the senior planners here at the District of Sooke. It's my first time presenting to y'all, so I guess this is a bit of an informal or formal greeting, but I look forward to getting to know you more. So I'm here to introduce the interim housing needs report requirements under the recent Bill 44 provincial legislation. I just want to note that full report will be brought forward to council in the future on this interim report, and this presentation is just intended to provide information on the report requirements. So a little bit of background first on housing needs reports. So housing needs reports help better understand current and future housing needs, identify gaps, and inform our land use planning. They collect and analyze quantitative and qualitative information such as local demographics, household incomes, housing stock, and housing costs to determine local need. In 2019, legislation from the province required municipalities to complete housing needs reports and determine anticipated housing needs in their communities. This legislation at the time required municipalities to complete them by 2022 and every 5 years thereafter. So as a result, Sooke did complete their housing needs report in 2019 with the assistance of a consultant. It included an in-depth demographic and housing data analysis, public engagement to determine the district's housing needs, and recommended several actions on how to address those needs. Fast forward to 2023 with the introduction of Bill 44. This introduced new requirements for housing needs reports, among other things, as you may know. So I'm just going to give a little kind of brief background of Bill 44 and how it impacts housing needs reports. So again, Bill 44 introduced a suite of amendments to the Local Government Act related to land use planning. So this included the small scale multi-unit housing requirements, updated housing needs report requirements, and introduced a proactive planning process, which looks to kind of combine the OCP, housing needs report, and zoning bylaws all together, or consider them all together. So what we're focusing on is the housing needs report aspect. So the updated housing needs report requirements, in summary, included timelines for completion. So both for an interim housing needs report, and then regular housing needs reports, and the requirement to update official community plans and zoning bylaws to consider the units identified in the housing needs report. A housing needs report method was introduced. So basically a standardized method for determining housing needs. As I understand, previously this wasn't prescribed, and as a result, everyone was doing their housing needs reports differently. So I'm going to kind of explain a little bit of the difference between the interim and regular housing needs reports, again, keeping in mind that this is to introduce the interim requirements. So the legislation requires the completion of an interim housing needs report by January 1st, 2025. Following this, official community plans and zoning bylaws are to be updated by December 31st, 2025, based on the interim H&R. So what this means essentially is looking to have enough zoned capacity to accommodate 20-year housing need, looking at land use designations in the official community plan to ensure that you have enough capacity to accommodate that 20-year need, and then policy statements to address the housing needs as part of the housing needs report. So specifically for the interim report, it sets the stage for future proactive planning and must include 3 items. So number 1 is the number of units needed currently and over the next 5 and 20 years, calculated using the prescribed H&R method. Requires a statement about need for housing near infrastructure supporting walking, cycling, transit, and other forms of transportation, and a description of actions taken by the local government that's receiving the most recent housing needs report to reduce housing need. The legislation further notes that the interim H&R can be an appendix to the existing housing needs report in a community or an entirely new plan. I'll speak to that a little bit later. So regarding the regular housing needs report requirements, again, this would come following the interim requirements, but just wanted to highlight this. The legislation requires the completion of a regular housing needs report by December 31st, 2028. Again, using the H&R method. However, these will differ slightly as they are a little bit more of a fulsome kind of understanding of the housing needs in a community. They require a more detailed analysis of 7 key areas of local government housing need, such as affordable housing, rental housing, special needs housing, housing for seniors, housing for families, shelters for those at risk of or experiencing homelessness, housing near various transportation options. These regular housing needs reports often are supplemented by additional demographic information, information on breakdown of unit need by tenure or unit type. So again, it's more of a comprehensive overview. So this would come further in 2028. I just want to speak to this H&R method a little bit further. So again, as I noted, it is a methodology prescribed in the legislation to calculate the number of units communities will need over a 5 and 20-year period. So it includes 6 items. Number 1 is the supply of units to reduce extreme core housing needs. So this is generally defined as those paying more than 50% of their income for housing. Number 2 is the supply of units to reduce homelessness. Number 3 is the supply of units to address suppressed household formation, excuse me. And this is essentially those households who are unable to form between 2006 and present due to constrained housing environments. So for example, young folks choosing to live with their parents for longer, those merging households to live with roommates so they can't find a place to live on their own. Number 4 is the supply of units to meet the household growth over 5 or 20 years. So this essentially quantifies the number of units to accommodate an increasing population over 20 years. So using a projection to identify what housing units might be needed. And then the supply of housing units needed to meet at least a 3% vacancy rate. And finally, number 6 is the supply of units need to meet local demand. So this is units required beyond those to adequately house current and anticipated residents. It addresses households who require or prefer housing with different characteristics. So again, people choosing to move for their kids to go to school or their families growing, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially what the interim report will do is spit out a number, the sum of these 6 items over a 5 and 20-year period. And then the interim report will also include the other 2 items noted, the need for housing close to transportation options, and then a list of actions complete since the last housing needs report. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the proactive and consistent planning framework that's sort of been prescribed by the updates to the Local Government Act, and what does that really mean? So again, these legislated deadlines for housing needs reports and official community plan and zoning bylaw updates set the stage for proactive planning. So updates required every 5 years, due in part to align with the census. So a lot of housing needs reports, again, were done with outdated census data. So this proactive framework really is aligning these timelines with the release of the census. Again, so then the number of units identified in the H&R and future housing needs reports will need to be considered in OCP and zoning. So again, looking at zone capacity, looking at the land use map designations and associated policies in your official community plan. So if you had an opportunity to read the report, I just kind of wanted to highlight this sort of cyclical process that's anticipated moving forward. And I wanted to note there was just a bit of a typo in the last box in the report. So I'll clarify that here. So again, just to reiterate the timeline and how this will kind of work moving forward, the interim housing needs report with those 3 items will be required by January 1st. Then we'll be required to update our OCP and zoning bylaw by December 31st, 2025. And then then the census will be released in 2026. And then the requirement for our regular housing needs report is necessary by December 31st, 2028 or sooner. And then basically every 5 years after that. So then once we've completed your regular housing needs report, 2 years following that, you're required to update your OCP and zoning bylaw to address the housing need identified in your housing needs report. So a little bit on the recommended approach to satisfy this legislated requirement for an interim housing needs report, recommending that this is completed by staff as an appendix to the existing housing needs report. We're recommending the interim H&R requirements be satisfied using the Housing Assessment Resource Tool, or HART. HART was developed by UBC and is a census-based tool that measures core housing need and affordable shelter costs by income category, household size, and priority populations. The HART calculates housing need based on the H&R method, so it satisfies that requirement. And the legislation is intended to be a streamlined option for municipalities to meet the interim requirements given the legislated timing. So it's recognized that there's a bit of a crunch to kind of complete all of this work. So this is kind of why we're recommending to use this tool, which will satisfy those 6 requirements that we need to do. Again, so this approach will set us up for future housing needs report reporting and subsequent OCP and zoning bylaw updates. So then in terms of next steps, again, I'll just kind of reiterate, I've kind of spoken to a lot of this in this presentation already, but staff are to complete the interim report and we'll bring it back to council for their consideration. Following that, the legislation requires that we post it publicly online on the district's website, somewhere that's accessible to the public. And then staff will complete the updates to the OCP and zoning bylaw as required by the legislation. In summary, we have that January 1st deadline to meet for the interim report. And then the interim H&R provides the number of units needed in 5 to 20 years using the standardized H&R method. It also includes a statement of need on housing near transportation and outlines actions taken since the last H&R. This provides a baseline for proactive and cyclical planning on a regular basis, so that 5-year cycle. And then our first full housing needs report, more comprehensive report, is to be completed in 2026, 27, and prior to that deadline of 2028 to be aligned with the census. And then following this, again, a further OCP and zoning bylaw update would follow. So with that, there's a recommendation in front of you. We're here to answer any questions as best we can, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that for the thorough report on all of this. I just have a question before I turn it over to council. So I can appreciate the report, and then how then does it play into the OCP and the zoning bylaw? So we post this out that this is the housing that's needed, but how then would a developer deliver what we actually need, and what does that look like?
So again, I can kind of speak to like how the legislated requirements would play out and us needing to update our OCPs and zoning bylaws. So specifically with the zoning bylaw, you'd have to look at having enough zoned capacity, and by zoned capacity, meaning within each zone, say there's, there could be specific density required. So we would have to determine what we have currently that's out there and identify, of all the zones, can it meet the number of units required? One thing to note, adoption of future small scale multi-unit housing requirements that could also play into the number of units required. So we might not have to do anything if we adopt that small scale multi-unit housing requirements, at least for now. And then moving forward, we'd basically have to look at our zoning map, identify what the density would be with our current zoning, and then look to address that by either looking at specific sites to zone to kind of hit that target number, et cetera. On the OCP side, it essentially front loads the whole process. So again, you identify your housing needs, and then you go out to the community to identify, hey, we have this document stating these are our housing needs over the next 5 and 20 years. And then we look to amend our land use map and align our policies with that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, because it's interesting when you think of accessible housing, usually that means it's one level, no stairs. And these small scale, like it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the housing we're going to get. If they're 4 plexes, then that equates to stairs. So it's still not going to provide that particular housing where we have residents who want to downsize into accessible housing. So that's just, I think, excuse me, sorry, in the audience there. Can you please take your conversation outside? It's just distracting while we're having the meeting. Thank you. It's just, it still doesn't provide that product that people are looking for. And then as with only so many single level houses, then with supply and demand, the price will go up. So it's not affordable either. And then how then do you, I guess, is the province providing some incentive tools to development, or are we then expected to do that?
I can answer a kind of question briefly here as well. I think hopefully this can provide it. I mean, with a regular report, kind of having additional information and potentially going into the community, you can sort of maybe add that qualitative data to the quantitative data that would then support, we understand there's a need for this type of housing in the community. That could be baked into that regular report as part of like a larger reporting period. And then what some housing needs reports will do will have, actions associated with how we achieve that requirement. So that's where it would come. Or in some cases too, it could further lead to a housing strategy or something like that to kind of identify that specific unit type that may be desired in the community. But through a regular report, we might get a better idea as to what's required, like more specific unit types and tenures and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. It'll be interesting just as we go forward with this then is just, and it's out there, any feedback you receive, is that, okay, we'd love to do it, but we can't deliver that type for these reasons, may then spark another conversation on what can we do to try to find that to put out the product that we know are needed. So I guess that'll come in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a regular report, you'd have a little bit more in-depth analysis and better understanding.
Okay.
This interim requirement is kind of setting that baseline moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Pearson, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the report and your first report. Thank you very much. Welcome. So my question was on the interim and the infrastructure reports and actions. And I get now in your explanation, that's a baseline so that we can't say, well, we did this again and again and again. So they're looking for improvements. Is there metrics or is there actions that the governing body, the province, is going to look at on our improvements? Or what have we done? Is there kind of, how does that feed in back into the system?
Perhaps maybe I'll just turn this over to my manager to see if he can speak on that. We certainly can't speak for the province,
No.
but I know there is certain funding and things like that was released as part of Bill 44. But not sure if can ask Jaden to step in and perhaps provide an answer.
Yeah, thank you. I guess through the policies or actions that come out of the housing needs report, the regular report, when we have more detail, we'd be doing check-ins every 5 years to make sure that we're on track essentially. And we kind of reevaluate growth as we have new census data. What the province does, I guess, could be a component of that, or as part of our actions internally would be to coordinate efforts with the province or advocate on behalf of the district for funding, et cetera, to help support certain objectives or goals that we establish as a result of our H&Rs.
And follow-up question of it. And thank you for that. That makes sense to me because us having a plan in place of a shovel-ready project and the obstacle might be them. So if they see that in the report, so I'm kind of thinking ahead to how that works. Okay, and then on the H&R, the supply in the different housing, where does that get accounted for? Like, I mean, traditionally, we're looking at SFRs, right? And is that changing through this report, or how do we measure that as affordability plays into it? You know, townhouses now become more popular, or the density is pushing people to a different type of housing.
Sure. So through the mayor to the councillor, again, this interim report will just provide supply number. It's not breaking it down by unit type,
Okay.
et cetera. So that's something that a regular report would tease out a little bit more, is that type, I guess. Was it townhouse? Are we needing more multifamily units? Are we needing, you know, where is the gap? So that's what comes with, again, that kind of full report, a little bit more detailed analysis.
And my final question starts off with a comment. So the OCP then, this is sort of like a chicken and an egg thing now. You know, the OCP used to drive us. Now it's this report's going to drive the OCP. Sort of we're flipping that over, and that cultural shift is. So our OCP is now due at December 31st, 2025. But the interim housing report is due on January 1st, 2024 or 2025. So we have a year to get our OCP in line. So now this report should be driving the OCP. That's kind of my, I'm asking them as a question, sorry.
Sorry, is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can kind of speak to this high level, but again, perhaps I'll just defer to my manager on work planning and the intent moving forward. But the intent would be to use this interim information to help inform the OCP moving forward.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor I'd St. Pierre then Bettles, please.
Through your worship to staff. I'm curious about, we do have these 6, affordable housing, rental housing, so on and so forth. That's all very good. It's actually all stuff that we desperately need. However, I can see a situation where if the province isn't actually making a distinction between types of housing units, we could be on the hook for actually producing any units. Because I know that at least some of the talk at UBCM and other similar functions is the units that are just market rate now, 10 years from now, are technically affordable, increase the supply no matter what. We don't care what kind of units you produce. So I'm curious how much latitude we're going to have in terms of the OCP and in terms of housing strategies, and how firmly can we hold the line in terms of these are the units we need, especially when we know the developers can't really make a profit with those particular units. Like your regular developer is not going to make affordable housing by definition is not profitable for developers to produce. Period, end of sentence. It requires subsidies. It requires additional inputs beyond the free market. So do we have a sense at this point in time as to whether or not, if those are the units we need, can we say, well, we've got them zoned, they're in our OCP, but no one's producing them, and we're coming up with a housing strategy, so wait for it. Because just producing more, say, single family detached and plowing in more green fields is going to increase our population and our problems, but not actually address our issues in terms of housing. Like, do we have any latitude as far as that goes? Or is it basically at that point, developers can come to us and say, province has insisted that you produce these units. You're not producing units. Let us produce what we want to produce. At which point we're meeting the needs of the market, but we're not meeting the needs of our housing needs. So what's the sense at this point in time of our tools in terms of actually meeting our needs through the housing needs and our OCP, as opposed to just increasing the number of units?
I can speak to this, Holden.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so through the mayor. So the policy, or sorry, the housing needs report that we currently have is still relevant. It's from 2019. So we do have individualized actions and objectives that will still be relevant. What we'd be doing here with the interim report is including an appendix just with some updated figures. So we do have direction through the 2019 report as it is essentially to look at those specifics that were done through the 2016 census data. Otherwise, with the OCP, we're just looking to accommodate need. We're not required to construct. The district does not construct housing, of course, but we would be able to have to accommodate that through land use planning and zoning, essentially. But yes, the goals and objectives, but more specifically to the different typologies or tenures, would be still relevant in the 2019 report.
Through your worship of staff. So my sense right now is that I already missed your name.
Holden.
Holden.
Yep.
According to Mr. Holden, or is it Holden?
Oh, Blue is my last name. Sorry. Holden Blue.
According to Mr. Blue.
There you go.
If we move forward with the multifamily, 4-on-1 that is being demanded in some ways by the province, we would probably be good in terms of actually meeting our projected growth and meeting those statistics, which means that the province wouldn't really have a need to come at us and say, produce something else, produce anything, because we actually would have met those basic needs, at which point the 2019 strategies would hold sway and we could basically shape our OCP using the 2019 strategies. Is that what I'm gathering? At this point, we don't have a situation of being pushed directly to produce any units, whatever they may be. Is that?
Through the mayor, that's correct. Assuming we do follow the requirements from the province and adopt this new legislation, it's anticipated that that will in itself accommodate our projected housing needs over time, just based on the data, correct? And then the 2019 housing strategy with the appendix, so it'll be amended to the end of this year, would still be relevant, and we'd still be following that direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beddoes, please.
Yeah, through your worship, to our CAO, actually, there's a lot of demands being put on staff in the next 2 years, and basically demand has come from the province. They've created this another whole bureaucracy that we're having to catch up or do something. And I can see our staff is up to its eyeballs in doing this stuff. How does it impact the regular work that we're doing in the district? And I would like to know is what does it do for the bottom line for the district? Are we getting some grant money from the province to carry this out? Or are we going to have to go to our tax increase? If you could shed a little light on that, please.
Sure, through your worship. To answer the first part of the question, it definitely impacts staff priorities. As later on in the agendas, council strategic plan, well, a bunch of these items are going to be taken up by the requirements of the province right now, whether it's the housing legislation or other. It's not just housing too, it's emergency management. Like there is tons of downloads that have come from the province over those last 2 years. And so staff right now are just kind of catching their breath and figuring out where that all fits. But absolutely, like from the planning specifically, it definitely would impact the day-to-day file reviews. Half of Mr. Blue's time here is going to be dedicated just to OCPs and housing needs and zoning bylaw updates and all of that, whereas he would have been a full-time senior planner in our and obviously doing these things as they come up cyclically, when we do an OCP update or housing needs update, but now this deadline has been forced upon us. So there's definitely a staffing capacity impact on that for sure. And part of through 2025 is what we're going to try and do is track this a little better. And so we can report back out on kind of how all these downloads are affecting us from the staff perspective, from the financing perspective. Mr. Curry can maybe speak to it if I'm misspeaking, but I believe we got $220,000-ish initially from the province that has been used up, I believe already all used up on consultants to hire to do some of this work. And so any of this undertakings in 2025 will be having to have a funding source identified, which most likely will be tax dollars unless Mr. Curry and Ms. Liu can be creative and find some other funding. But as far as I know, there's no new funding coming from the province at this stage to get the rest of these projects over the finish line. And as you know, the OCP alone was $300,000. So it adds up very quickly.
Thank you for that report. It was a lot more detailed than I expected. I guess that throws something back to us now is we need to lobby whatever government we're going to get in the next little while and get some funding, because again, it's going to go impact on the taxpayer. And every 100,000 or so is a tax increase. So we're getting sort of forced into this in some respect. So I appreciate your remarks. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so just following up on that, how very good that the province has also produced a set of templates and guidelines for all local governments in BC to take some of the pressure and weight off of our planning departments. I guess this housing assessment resource tool from UBC, is this more or less a plug and play where you can generate reports very quickly?
Yeah, through the merits of the councillor, that is the intent. You plug in your municipality and it produces the information necessary that's specified in that housing needs report method. So it's addressing that.
So this looks like a great, you've got a game plan, a timeline, you're dealing with the staffing resource issue by delaying the next new housing needs report to 2028. I'm very interested in that conversation around market forces versus controlled growth, right? So we have a vision for Sooke and yet the market carries on. So strategy 3 in the housing needs report, high priority, was facilitate rental housing supply. So the market has said, okay, we've delivered, I think 650 units are incoming of rental supply. Now, the district, we have no control over that, do we? Effectively, they're coming in with their proposals and yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but it's.
But I think on that is it will ultimately depend on the pro forma. So the units can be approved by us and discussed by us, but ultimately it's up to that particular applicant when the green light is a green light for them, and it's up to them. It can just sit, as we've seen land just sit, despite a proven need.
Yeah.
So I think that's where in some cases you see incentive programs come out. Like we saw it with the cut of GST, I believe, on rental build, like that the federal government did.
Yeah.
I can't fully remember what
Yeah,
that was,
exactly.
but it was to incentivize. So that's where I think we just.
Yeah.
At this point, need to wait, given that we're in interregnum for a while.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm curious of how the district does use the housing need report, because in staff reports over these last 5 years, I have not seen a lot of reference to the housing need report. For example, when we addressed SHMU, priority 1 was to enhance density on properties already served with municipal water and sewer lines in existing urban zones. So we were anticipating that small scale multi-unit housing in our housing needs report. And yet the reason we pushed back on it was our concern with population capacity and road infrastructure. Anyway, I could go on, but thank you very much for the report. Very substantial.
And then on that, that's changed. We do have to adopt the bylaw, which is coming, but it still may not necessarily hit this. So perhaps just a suggestion to staff going forward when this report is adopted or received by council is that there's a reference to it in future applications, and then we can see where it connects. Or if anything comes forward in the meantime, where we see that there are units, say, that'll meet the needs of accessible housing or whatever, that we can see the connection between it. Okay. All right, there's a recommendation here that council will receive for information the housing needs report introduction report dated October 21st, 2024, and that council directs staff to complete an interim housing needs report as an appendix to the 2019 housing needs report to bring forward to council for consideration of its endorsement prior to January 1st, 2025. It's moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Bateman. No, we're in special council. All right, you missed the intro part. Okay, we're in special council, as it says. So moved and seconded. Any further comment? So this means then it'll be the meeting in December if we have to have this passed by January 1st. That shortens the time window for you. Sorry. All those in favor? And that's approved unanimously. Okay, next on is 6.2 General Asset Management Reserve Fund.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today's report requests the adoption of the Asset Management Reserve Fund bylaw. This fund establishing this fund is the next step in the district's asset management plan, which was endorsed by council in March of 2023. The bylaw outlines the regulations for fund collection and utilization. Some specific regulations included in the bylaw are a property tax increase of either 2 or 3% as determined by council to deposit the funds in this reserve. Each year, council may amend the tax increase percentage for that year based on an unanimous motion to all council members. So all council members must vote to essentially not do the 2 or 3% increase. Also, the council may deposit additional funds into the reserve. So through resolution, we would bring a recommendation forward at the budget process. And money in this reserve will accrue interest. So just it'll be pooled with our other investments and we will allocate interest to it on an annual basis. The potential financial impact of the bylaw would be a 2 or 3% tax increase annually. And over a 5-year span, this would equal to $1.4 million generated for the maintenance and replacement of our infrastructure. And the goal identified through the asset management plan is to collect 4.85 million, so upwards to 5 million. And the time to get there at 2% a year would be 24 years to reach this target of $5 million a year. That concludes the summary of the report, and I'm happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions from members of council. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Through your worship to, I guess, Ms. Gray. I'm curious about what 5 million might be worth 20 years from now. I mean, I know we have interest involved and so on and so forth, but given the cost of road infrastructure, feels like one single semi-significant road could basically wipe out 5 million like that. So I guess how realistic is it that this will actually be sufficient to our needs in terms of asset replacement over time?
Well, through the mayor to Councillor St. Pierre and Mr. Curry can add on to this. I think that's why it's recommended to review this every 5 years to ground truth it and confirm where inflation's gone and all of that, economies of scale. So I don't know the present value of 20 million or $5 million today. Yeah, that is the plan, is that after every 5 years, we should be doing either a major or a minor review and update of this plan and just confirming we're still on target, and will this actually, is $5 million the right number now, or is it going to be something most likely higher? So that is the number we know today, which is why that number's in there, just to get everything started. And then in 5 years, we will present a new report to council with some consideration if that number needs to change.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson.
Yes, through you. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Gray.
You're welcome.
Is this fund, is it used for ongoing preventative maintenance? Is it a working fund as well as a savings account? Because, you know, when we looked at that, when we started on this, the total asset management was what, 50 million, or it was way up there, right? So, you know, we get 5 million in 5 years. What are we doing along the way? Are we using that? Sorry, that's my question.
Sure, through the chair to Councillor Pearson, the funds used for capital replacement. So if there was major maintenance or replacement required, it'd be requested to use this fund through the budget process. So we still fund we fund maintenance, day-to-day maintenance through operations, through taxation. And then this would be for specific like major replacement.
So it could be used, it would be recommended to be used in our budget process to pay for a certain project. And I'd say preventative maintenance.
That's correct. I'll just pull out the exact portion of the bylaw here. I'd like to refer to that's gonna be your go-to for the exact use of the fund when it comes to into a meeting where you're being requested to use it. So the terms are sorry. So identified a need to fund the construction, upgrading, replacement, and renewal of general assets. So that's the exact use that you're permitted to use this fund for.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so you're basically this bookkeeping to put various reserve funds under the one roof, yes?
That's correct. Yeah, we're consolidating the other capital asset reserve funds that existed to provide this guideline for us to how to utilize the fund. And then also essentially relate it to the asset management plan that we're following and started for 2024.
And last year early this year, we dedicated, I think I've got 218,000 here as a starter. Was that at the 2% or the 3%? That's the 2%.
That's the 2%.
2%.
The 218 was this year.
Right. And in this year, we will again look at a 2 or 3.
Yeah,
Annually, we'll do that decision.
absolutely, yes.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Through your worship to staff. I'm just curious actually about what sort of considerations are made in terms of sort of preventative, but more in terms of how are we building. So for example, I've noticed a lot of our trails are gravel trails. They're not necessarily paved with asphalt or any such thing. Is there any significant consideration, or is there a consideration of which one is less costly to maintain over time? So in 20 years, which one? I'm assuming there must be some consideration, but how's that handled?
Sure, that may be a question you want to pause for the budget deliberations or the service level reviews. It is more subject expert question for someone in the field who's doing the purchasing and doing the considerations for which type of materials to use. So on the finance side, if they were requiring asphalt or aggregate to do a trail, we could fund either from this if it's replacement of existing infrastructure. So this fund could be utilized for either or, but the decision to do one or the other isn't on, I don't think, anyone's desk that's in this room right now.
Through your worship, is there any possibility that in future council deliberations, we could have a better sense of, if we have a choice like that? I don't know if that would actually be strictly operational in the weeds, or if council will be looking at, one type of material versus another in terms of it's going to be a significant upfront increase in cost. Is this something that would come to council, or we just get the staff recommendation? Would that staff recommendation automatically take into account, asset management and the future costs? And would council be made aware of that?
Through your worship, a little bit of both, I think. I think as far as the weeds of what material staff uses on a specific project would be kind of, I think, in the weeds of that decision if you were going to weigh in on that. However, I think to get ahead of the queue on this, as Mr. Curry was suggesting during the capital budget presentation during the budget meeting, is when a time where we can, thank you for the points, we can kind of raise more or provide more information to council on what's included in these projects and those factors that have been considered when this cost of the project is being included in the budget, because you just see a number of, a trail, $1 million. So we can definitely make sure we're sharing a bit more information on like why certain materials have been would be chosen, whether it's compressed gravel. There's always environmental impacts that are considered. So sometimes things may cost a little more, but in the long run, because it has an environmental benefit, that would be the chosen option. But we can definitely, through budget 2025 presentations, make sure we highlight a bit more of that information.
Okay, so do you have a question, Councillor Beddoes? Okay, so the council provide first, second, and third reading, a general asset management reserve fund bylaw number 916/2024, moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, just very briefly, this is something very prudent that we need to look at, and we made that decision a while ago to go with this. And as much as it's going to cause some tax increases, it's better that we have planned for it than 10 years down the road. And I go back to our role here as council is not just 3 or 5 years; it's to look 20 years down the road to our community. So I'm certainly in favor of this, and glad we're moving forward with it. And thanks, staff, for all the heavy lifting and work and getting this done. Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre? Anyone else? I'll call a question. All in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. 6.3, 2024 to 27 strategic planning, please.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to introduce our updated strategic plan that reflects our priorities for the remainder of this council's term and carry us into the next term. Okay, I'm just going to briefly walk through this and then happy to answer any questions or have some conversation after my presentation here. So first off, I wanted to just touch on why does a strategic plan matter? A strategic plan is a roadmap to guiding the district towards its vision. It helps aligns resources, efforts, and priorities to achieve specific community-driven goals. It's a tool we use that council can use when setting new priorities or exploring new ideas received from, community members or other members of the public. The first questions that's usually asked is how does certain initiative align with our strategic plan? And if it doesn't, do we need to amend the plan to include this? And if so, should something be removed, or is this a net new ask? Or is this something that can be included in the next version of the plan, et cetera? So it's a really useful document for the community, for council, for staff to use as our guiding document to when we get pressure, on a regular daily basis of what about this, what about this, what about this? This is kind of a document we can point back to and go, how does it fit within this? And if not, then spark that conversation with council on if this warrants a change in that. Our mission focuses on preserving Sooke's unique character. It's a strong sense of community, natural beauty, and West Coast aesthetic. A core aspect of our mission is managing growth in a sustainable way. We are committed to not just planning for today, but for future generations, ensuring decisions made make a positive difference in the long term. Our mission includes fostering a diverse and resilient local economy, reflecting a transition point in our history from being a bedroom community to one that's more self-sufficient. And while our mission and vision haven't changed a lot over the years, the action items council supports to achieve the mission and vision have evolved as the district has grown over the years and will continue to evolve. This strategic plan, yes, it's a snapshot in time, but it's a live document that will continuously be updated and reported out on as we progress. I just wanted to briefly touch on our core values and guiding principles that made up this document. These are similar to the previous plan, but their meaning has evolved over the years. Our core values and guiding principles act as the foundation for every decision made in our organization. They serve as a compass, ensuring that we stay aligned with the community's needs and priorities. These values don't just apply to staff, they shape how council and staff work together. One of our key values is effective governance, which means staff support council in making thoughtful, transparent, and accountable decisions through well-informed council reports and information provided to council. We strive to manage resources wisely, responsibly, always keeping the long-term best interests of the community in mind. Every decision we make is geared towards creating a safe, inclusive, and vibrant community where residents can thrive. We are committed to thinking beyond the short term. Our guiding principles encourage us to make decisions that benefit future generations, and they also push us to continuously improve. And by adhering to these values, we ensure that we are always striving for better outcomes for the community we serve. And then over the next couple slides, I'll just touch on the next few slides here, our strategic areas of focus. The plan identifies 5 strategic areas of focus. This is the bread and butter that shapes staff work plans and identifies priorities for council leadership and advocacy. These include sustainable growth and environmental stewardship, community dev, economic development, community safety and well-being, infrastructure investments and multimodal transportation networks, and organizational development and capacity building. These areas of focus will be reported out to council and the community on future council reports, in our budget planning, in our annual reports, et cetera. They form the building blocks of our decision-making. The first area here is, in no particular order, is sustainable growth and environmental leadership. Every decision we make today will impact the future of Sooke for generations to come. As we look to the future, one of our priorities is to ensure that our growth as a community is not only well-planned, but also sustainable. Council identified a focus on sustainable land use planning, accommodating growth while minimizing its environmental impact. At the staff level, actions on the horizon supporting sustainable growth and environmental stewardship include streamlining policies and practices for development applications, identifying and mapping environmentally sensitive areas, along with updating the official community plan. Council's role is included in advancing our partnership with the Sooke Nation, which also includes revising the MOU. On the community economic development front, an iterative theme of this plan is growing our local economy. This has been said for many years now. This has been a priority of council to do what we can to grow our local economy. And this plan prioritizes the importance of providing essential local services, such as the community health center within the Lot A development, and acknowledges the role of tourism as growing our local economy. At the staff level, it identifies enhancing support for local businesses and startups. It highlights council's advocacy for work with the Ministry of Health and Island Health, for example, to advocate for expanded healthcare services. You know, other items included in here are the hotel tax, which our community economic development officer is working through, and as well as I'm sure most people have heard now, the Juan de Fuco tourism plan, which is a very exciting initiative for the district to be involved with and included on, and very excited to harness those resources that will be coming. Infrastructure, investments and multimodal transportation networks. To no one's surprise, we have this is one of our priorities. And by investing in our roads, public spaces, and utilities, we are not only addressing current needs, but also preparing Sooke for future growth that we know is coming. As well as roads are not the only thing. That's why we made sure it includes, multimodal transportation. There's more than just roads. There's trail systems, there's walking, there's biking, there's other ways that people want to get around the town. So we need to ensure that we're covering all of those bases off. We have several significant projects already underway for road improvements. As well as we're expanding our public utilities with the wastewater expansion in its final stages. But we know there's still more to do. We're looking to expand multimodal transportation networks, focusing on not only cars, but prioritizing public transit, cycling paths, and pedestrian-friendly designs. You know, for example, Demamio Trail has been 10 years in the making, so getting that project over the finish line and to actually post a tender for that is very exciting for the community. Just a footnote I have here is these are expensive projects. So working together with the community and all levels of government to help fund these initiatives is crucial for the success of the project. And a couple more areas here is the next area is community safety and well-being. Our focus on community safety and well-being goes beyond just physical safety. It's about fostering an inclusive, vibrant, and supportive environment where everyone feels they belong. As expressed in the goal statement, community safety and well-being are deeply tied to inclusivity, economic vibrancy. The residents feel safe and supported. They are more likely to participate in the local economy, attend community events, and engage in social life. This in turn strengthens our economy and enriches the culture of Sooke. Of course, our first responders play a critical role in keeping our residents safe, responding to emergencies, and protecting persons and property. Our strategic plan integrates safety elements into subdivision development standards and zoning regulations and strengthens climate disaster preparedness and resilience. It enhances community identity and cultural vibrancy through public art. It recognizes the work of council to engage with the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General to strengthen proactive policing and funding support, ensuring public safety initiatives are well supported and effectively managed. It's important that these areas of focus work together when used in decisions and not be contradictory, which will cause confusion. And the last area here, before we get into the reporting, is organizational development and capacity building. Again, I want to thank council for keeping this as a priority for the district going forward. I think everyone recognizes all of this can't happen if there's not the backbone of staff there to help support a lot of these initiatives and get the on the ground day-to-day work completed. So council can focus their energy and attention on advocacy items, which you'll see there are numerous ones in our strategic plan. Our strategic plan recognizes that to meet growing needs of our community, it's essential we invest in our most important resources, our people. Sooke is growing, and as we grow, we must also adapt. By building organizational capacity, we are preparing ourselves to meet the future needs of the community. At the heart of our organizational development efforts is a focus on service delivery. We're working to ensure every interaction with the district is a positive one, whether it's through more efficient processes, better technology, or improved customer service. Our goal is to build a resilient organization that can withstand the challenges of growth, change, and external pressures. Among priorities in this area includes determining a committee structure that supports promoting a more effective, responsive, and transparent governance model, empowering residents and stakeholders while also streamlining business processes to maximize organizational capacity. And the last section I just want to touch on would be reporting and metrics. Once the strategic plan is endorsed, each service area will confirm specific performance indicators. This will ensure staff, council, and the community knows how progress is measured and reported, ensuring transparency and accountability. Metrics include how many kilometers of, can include, for example, how many kilometers of sidewalks we build each year, kilometers of sewer mains or website traffic, etc. Of that note, just a fun fact, we currently have 27 kilometers of sidewalks in the district and 18 kilometers of trails and 887 subscribers to our monthly newsletter. And this is so important for the success of the plan because what gets measured gets managed. And in the world of constantly moving the goalposts and moving on to the next, it's crucial for us, for the community and for staff and for council to take that second to pause for applause, acknowledge our successes, and not just move on to the next. So this will be an important mechanism of the plan going forward. It'll be the formal reporting that happens in June with the annual report. There'll be a year-end reporting that aligns with our budget process on a regular basis, and as well as council reports are presented to council throughout the year as they're hitting one of these deliverables or one of these targets that will be reported back to council, whether it's a regular council report or a department quarterly report. And on that, I just want to thank you to council and to staff for all your efforts and collaborating on this plan and for the good work that's to come. I'll turn it over to council for any questions, and we have some suggested resolutions, and I'll leave that right there for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just writing down the 18 kilometers of trails, 27 kilometers of sidewalks, and 870 subscriptions.
887.
887. It's already gone up. No, I'm kidding. I think, well, we didn't have
Yeah,
one,
from
so
zero.
we did go from zero. Just to comment on the metrics, what might be helpful with like building permits is the average processing time, our business licenses, same sort of thing. And then we can see how that's improving or if, what that all means. Or then it's like, well, this is just the average. So expect it to be 2 weeks, 1 month, whatever that might be going forward, and recognizing complete applications from incomplete, I think is always important as well. But as we've received just considerable heat over the turnaround time. So it would be, I think that would be an important metrics to showcase. So I'm getting nods on that. So thank you. Okay, council members, Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time in coming. Much appreciate. I appreciate the fact that it's legible and clear. So that's excellent. I appreciate the format and the presentation. One thing that did come up while we were doing the workshopping and trying to figure out our strat plan was that in this particular iteration, we haven't actually focused in the same way on climate adaptation and on climate. Now, if one recalls the previous strat plan, at that point in time, we declared a climate crisis. We declared it as an emergency. It feels like it was a completely different time because we hadn't had all the wildfires. We hadn't had atmospheric rivers. There was still some honest doubt from members of the public and just generally whether or not this was actually an emergency, whether or not it was needed. Why are we doing this thing? Since then, I know that we've adopted things like the LCR, the low carbon resilience lens. And I know that there's a process where that actually isn't just one person's responsibility, but it's supposed to go through the entire organization at every decision at every level. And I know that's what we've been moving towards. As such, we no longer have certain pieces that our residents have come to expect, things like a climate action committee, and at the same time, an actual strategic focus on climate. I feel like I would really like to see some more information put for the public on how we're using the LCR with all of our departments and how it's not just one champion now for climate work, it's actually everyone incorporating into all the work. Because I think that's really important that everyone understands that the entire organization is now making this a focus, which is why we don't have one person, one committee, so on and so forth. Because otherwise it looks like we just dropped the ball. Or it can look like we just dropped the ball, and that's not what's happening. But unless we communicate that clearly, I think there's the risk of that being the perception. So that was one thing. In the last section where we start getting into the nuts and bolts and really saying, this is what's happening, this is who's doing it. If it's possible, I know that in previous strat plans, we had some timelines. That would be lovely. That way the public has a better idea, and so do we, as to when things are meant to go off, if we know. If we know, it's nice to include that information. And I think it was mentioned by yourself, but I would love to see this emphasized more. I forget the section at this point. That we're looking for, I think you phrased it as positive experiences for our residents when dealing with the district. You said it that way, but that's not how it's said in the strat plan. I think the way you said it is perfect. I would like to see your wording used in the strat plan. We're working towards positive experiences for our residents in all their dealings with the district. Thank you.
Okay, others, Councillor Pearson.
Yes, through the chair to you. Thank you for the report, and I think it captured very positively the discussion around our strategic plan. I think there was some things in there around the community well-being and safety and the positive interactions with the district. I also know that we've adopted a code of conduct. I'd like to see that included in the strategic plan, because code of conduct is a two-way street. We're doing our part on our side, and I think there's a message that goes out to the public. Also, the metrics section, following on the chair's comments, I really think it's important to share those metrics. However we do it, maybe at tax time, we do that brochure, because that's what people are looking for. How are you spending our money? And what are you doing? How are you improving our community? And lots of things go unnoticed or unsaid. And so I really like the idea of the metrics. And then if the metrics could be included in the budget deliberation process, just so that you've got that on the side of your desk to say, okay, well, did we build enough sidewalks, or how do we budget for 1 kilometer of sidewalk per year, every year going up for our term? So that was my comments, but thank you and well done for bringing this together.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, thanks very much. I feel quite proud of this document. I think we did a really good job, as Councillor Pearson was saying there, of pulling this together, and staff was very much involved. I think it's interesting that we're calling this the District of Sooke Strategic Priorities 2024-27. Previous documents have always said council strategic priorities, and this is a recognition that we're in this together. So I'm glad to see that. There is a reference to the code of conduct. And interestingly, the way this plan is structured, it's very clear what we are responsible for at this table and what staff will be responsible for. So seeing those advocacy areas, and under advocacy, under organizational development, implemented of a council code of conduct policy, which we've done already. Tick. Hooray. Okay, don't carry on. Okay, what else did I want to say? And low carbon resilience, great to see that repeatedly cited in this document as a whole of organizational recognition that this is climate action by any other word, those 3 words. And SFU continues to generate implementation plans that we can adjust and adapt to. I noted I'm always looking for flaws. So under community economic development, you don't have an ongoing section. Okay, so Ms. Scott has been doing a lot of great work, and I think that needs to be cited on page 47 of the agenda. Yeah, I could read through all the now and next items, which is where we're hitting the road, and those items are substantial, and they will certainly fill the next 3 years. Thank you.
Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment to staff. This is well done. I heard a few minor things from council, but they were basically minor. This is well done. Somebody's put a lot of effort into it. It's well presented, easy to read. And that was one of the things we said at the first strategic plan. We want it to be easy to read and not sort of in not legalese, but Sookie's. It has to be so the public can look at it and get an idea of where we're going. And you've accomplished that. So kudos. I like the code of conduct reference to it. Some of these other things that are proposed, I don't have a great deal of problem with it, but I think that you're there. It's done. So I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just touching on concern raised by the member of the public earlier. Thank you. We do make reference to our work with the Sooke in two places. So one is around sustainable growth and environmental stewardship, and the other under council leadership and advocacy, sustainable growth and environmental stewardship. So a thought I had, and again, I know that we want to get on with this, but given that we do need to add in a piece on the ongoing on community active, a note about the code of conduct is perhaps the beginning, we could include a statement of reconciliation. It would be, it could fit on the first page. You know, our mission, our vision, we have our core values and guiding principles in the reporting section, but perhaps there could be a place there to put a statement of reconciliation in place. And then it would highlight the work that we're doing as opposed to just having it in an ongoing in two different places. And it's just that whole, we are recognizing the lands where we do our work. We are looking to reframe our conversations as he's been doing. It might just capture what we're doing and what we're striving for into the future. And then it might, it's all sort of tucked into our vision statement, which is very small, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, it's a handful of words, but if there was a separate reconciliation piece or a separate statement of reconciliation, perhaps that might work. Councillor St. Pierre? Recognizing that the work is ongoing and will continue to be. We also are participate in CIRIC, South Island Recreation Advisory Committee, and then collaboration and work through participation at the CRD, Vancouver Island Regional Library, and others. So I don't know what that statement would look like, and I'm hoping it's not too much to just add that in, and then it could come forward for final. Councillor St. Pierre?
I completely agree. I was trying to figure out where to put it, where to place it. I was wondering if it might fit under core values and guiding principles.
But it should be at the top. It's just like we begin every meeting
No, absolutely. And
recognizing the land. It should be right at the top.
And it could go at the top of core values and guiding principles is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, and that's where I would leave staff to come up with just format on that page.
At which one is the first page of the document with
Yes.
the first bullet?
Well, it depends, because if you look at that, you would say that our mission and vision comes ahead of core values and guiding principles, and the font is bigger. So I would look at it that you read left to right. So in this case, it could just be at the very top across the whole page. And again, I'll get in staff know the formatting to have a statement of reconciliation, and these pieces could be in a smaller font underneath and it would fit on the first page. It would be the first thing you read.
Okay. The other thing that I had considered was actually allowing staff to come back with a vision statement that includes what we have here, but would also include that piece. At which point, our vision, I don't know why mission has to come before vision. I think, quite frankly, vision can come first. At which point you could have our vision working together with our SARC partners to create an inclusive, healthy, and self-sufficient community where the rainforest meets the sea.
Okay.
Anyway, just two thoughts, but
okay. I see staff making notes. Okay. So in terms of giving this direction to staff, so do we just, rather than endorsing, do we just bring it to the next meeting, or what would staff prefer?
Yeah, I think, sorry, through the mayor to council. What I would propose is a motion, which will be before you in a moment here, indicating that council directs staff to bring back the draft strategic plan with the following amendments, and just listing out what council's proposed changes would be, just to make sure that staff is very clear on exactly what you would like to include.
Okay, so then here that would cover it. I'll read it out. The council directs staff to bring forward the draft strategic plan for council consideration with amendments to include statement of reconciliation, an indication of current economic development work, and reference to the code of conduct?
I
Or-
believe it's in there.
I don't, maybe Counselor Pearson?
Yeah, mine, my reference to the code of conduct, because it is to be sharing that, making sure that it's communicated out to the public, that we will operate with a code of conduct, and it tacitly implies that we expect that back. We can't demand that, but it's just, we're a professional organization and we should say that.
So do we put that?
I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
That was just a comment as we were going through it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't, okay, so it would just be a statement of reconciliation and an indication of current economic development work.
Absolutely.
Okay, Counselor St. Pierre?
I actually think that what Councillor Pearson is saying is really quite important, especially given, the kind of pressure on everyone when things become uncivil. We've had a few talks about, how that affects everyone and everything. I do think that that is actually another place where we haven't actually included inclusivity and safety for people in our core values and guiding principles. And yet, at every council meeting that I've seen, when things get a little bit tense, I'll see you stand up and basically say, at least we're trying to create a safe environment where everybody, please no clapping. We are trying to do this. I think making it explicit as a core value and guiding principle would actually, I think, satisfy what Councillor Pearson is looking for. And I think it's actually pretty important because right now, in our community and just in our society, it's getting lost.
Okay, well, that's like effective governance.
Effective or a core value, because it's actually a core value we're using, inclusivity and creating a safe space. I don't know if that's what you're.
Yeah, and yeah, we're kind of going down that road, and I don't want, not to beleaguer it, but it's about the safety of our staff while they're at work.
Yeah.
Okay, we demonstrate that. We have to demonstrate that in our elected roles. Staff has to do that, but we also are expecting it, but we're backing up our staff.
And also the safety of our residents when they're speaking. They're not
Absolutely.
gonna, there's a general piece here where we are pushing on it pretty hard. And it's
Yes,
good, but we're not explicit here. So
Right.
people don't necessarily know what to expect, which I think is what Councillor Pearson was saying.
correct.
Okay, no, I hear you. It's just what staff need is a bit more direction than on what you want to see changed. We get that it's all implied. So where does it go?
Under guiding principles is where I put it.
So under core values and guiding principles,
One more bullet.
one more bullet that says,
Inclusion and safety for all.
inclusion and safety for
Or
all.
inclusivity and safety. So I would leave that to staff to workshop that one, like come back in a draft. I'm sure they'd do something fine.
Include, okay, under guiding for adding inclusivity and safety for all. Or something like that.
With the idea of civility, or we strive for civility for all. I don't know. something like that.
Inclusivity and civility. I just don't want to leave that because then we're going to come back and see safety for all and then be like, wait a second.
No, yeah, it's
Let's get this done.
Yeah. Okay, maybe just, sorry, staff, is guiding principles, adding words around inclusive wording like, for example, I'd like you to come up with something better than that without,
Sorry.
she knows what we're talking
Yeah.
about, so that helps. Okay. Yes,
Yeah, so moving on to I think we've got that clear. Moving on to
we're not moving on because we haven't made this motion yet.
I know, well, I have more questions here.
Okay, well, we're trying to get to a motion here, so
Well, we have some important material in this staff report related to recommended committees.
we're not on the committee motion yet.
Oh, is that a separate motion?
We're looking at putting
Oh,
a
just
motion forward on this
part one.
part,
Okay,
so we're
go.
not moving on because we haven't left it yet.
Okay, thank you for your clarity.
So who would
Your
like to
worship.
move this, please? Counselor Beddoes and Pearson have moved it. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks. There's some great little notations, but I don't want to get bogged down wordsmithing this thing for the next 6 months. We're 99.9% there. Let's get on with it, get it passed. It's been 2 years waiting for this. I'm very happy with the way it is right now. But those slight changes, fine, come back, let's get it passed.
Sounds good. Counselor Pearson?
I agree with Councilor Beddoes.
Excellent. Okay, this is moved and seconded. Anything from anyone else? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, staff. I appreciate your patience. We do like to group think together. So just one more week, one more meeting. and we'll be there. Okay, the next part of this is, there was a recommendation here and that council directs staff to prepare terms of reference for the following committees of council. And in the report, sort of two have surfaced. I think it was Community Economic Development being one, Land Use and Development Committee being number two, potentially. So, thoughts from members of council, Councillor Pearson?
Yes, through the chair to our CAO. Would these be standing committees or would they be appointed? Because they could be the mayor standing committees, right? Are we just making it general? I'm kind of. Just want
Through the mayor, I guess the idea being that they were going to be a general committee. However, that's why this is in front of you, is to get some direction on what kind of committee makeup do you want these to look like? Just based on, you know, the strategic planning that occurred and then just the feedback with the community. These were two of the committees that kind of rose to the top of the top priority. There's probably will be more eventually from this, but just to get us started somewhere,
Yep.
Was the idea behind those.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with how these have popped out. But okay, no, that was my thought, was around these could potentially be standing committees created by the mayor.
So yeah, they would still need to be resourced and supported by staff. And so the difference being a standing committee must have at least half the members seated, are council members and matched by members of the public. And a select committee is where there's one council member appointed and the rest are community members. So there's a bit of a difference. The mayor appoints on one, select being a committee of council. Councillor St. Pierre, had your hand up.
Through your worship to staff, I'm just curious about the other committees that, specifically the Arts Committee. It seems clear, well, not clear, maybe only clear to me that it might move into community economic development in some manner. So I would suggest that under scope of work that, you know, some mention of that could be made. I was curious as to whether or not we've now identified that we actually should have a variance committee, and whether or not that work can actually be placed under the land use and development. I guess that would be a question for, legally speaking, is the variance board a completely separate entity, or can it actually, can the same membership potentially deal with that? It seems like.
No.
Okay.
My understanding is the board, they have to be independent fully. Yes.
Well, okay, so that answers those questions. Thank you.
Yeah, just to confirm, yeah, the Board of Variance, that's why it's not included on here, because this is a mandatory committee. You guys can't say no, don't have one. So which is why it hasn't been included as a suggestion. And then to your point, with the arts piece, yes, at least for initially, staff were just thought as this community active committee, if it's supported by council, gets set up, initially they could be looking at, you know, art as one of their subsets, and then maybe eventually there's a standalone spa committee recreated again or something. But at the time, it just thought, based on what these committees we need them to do now, it seemed like this was the higher level committees we were suggesting at this time.
I like that you've got two higher level committees that basically cover a lot of ground. And obviously you can include, you know, could council be potentially offered by staff a structure that would include things like subcommittees? Because I think that it might make more sense in terms of staff resources and just populating committees and so on and so forth, if we had that type of an option. So, and just so we know what that might look like if it's possible. So we have an idea of what that could entail.
Through the mayor to council, may you please provide some clarification on what exactly you mean by a subcommittee, like a committee delegated from another committee?
Absolutely. So an example, for example, with the community act dev, if we look at the arts again, you might have a few people there that would specifically be part of a subcommittee dealing with arts questions. And I don't know what that looks like legally in terms of committee structures and what, you know, local government can and cannot do, but I'm sure you do or can find out, and then we could know and make hopefully a good and informed decision on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the clarification. So through the mayor to council, a committee of council certainly can have a subcommittee as long as it's within the terms of reference of the original committee itself. It can strike into smaller groups, working groups, task force, et cetera. And I think that staff's intention in the motion before you is to bring this back with a staff report and attached terms of reference for further deliberation from council. So I would slightly suggest some of the semantics around the committee structure be discussed at a later date once staff have a better understanding of which committee types council is looking for. But again, just to answer your original question, that is certainly possible as long as it's within the scope of the terms of reference.
Okay, so that'll come. So perhaps on one report, we could receive the details on the Board of Variance and then the Community Economic Development Committee and the Land Use and Development Committee. And I'll suggest they could be select committees to enable more members of the public present. Then a standing committee would be half and half. If we're looking to have more public engagement, then you would want more people. Otherwise, we could just bring it all to committee of the whole, where you would have a majority of council anyway. Or a special council meeting to deal with them. So what is the point of the committee? And then just from a collaborative viewpoint, I'd rather all of us weigh in on the membership, because otherwise I'll make that decision and someone will be unhappy and that'll create another committee that we need. But anyway, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so I know I personally want to be on one of these committees. So I think if it's, well, maybe not. That'll be discernment. But if there's just two committees and only two council appointees, then that's going to leave someone out in the cold. When we were doing this process, I believe staff made it clear that you had capacity to handle 3 committees, support 3 committees. Was that accurate, or am I misremembering that?
Through your worship, probably accurate-ish. I think we had 5 at one point last time, I believe. There was quite a few.
We had 4 last time.
Yeah, it was 4 possibly. So, again, we take direction from council. So if there's multiple committees you want formed, then that's up to staff then to bring a report back and advise what resources we needed then if you wanted to create multiple committees.
Yeah.
What we could do is with the terms of reference, is just provide guidance there on if you were to have a standing committee, this is what it looks like. If it was to be a select committee, this is what it looks like. And once we see all of that, we can make a determination. I'll just remind everyone, we also have a standing committee on healthcare, which is not met because we've been waiting for outcomes from the province. And now we're in this interregnum period, but that still is a very important file and that will need to move on. We also have the Sooke MOU working group and we're working on establishing this. So it may be helpful in the staff report just to note what we do actually have that is just sitting at the moment, and that might help appeal that, okay, everyone has something. Excuse me, folks, we're just a little distracted with the chatter. Thank you. So just and then also some of the appointments that are coming up for renewal from members of council to external boards. So then you can also kind of weigh in that external committee appointment work that's also happening. That helps. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I'll carry on a little bit. That all makes great sense. You know, a few weeks back, I read out a list of all the potential committees that any particular local government could form. And that was based on looking through CRD municipalities. And there's a wide range. I think, you know, these are 2 really key fundamental committees, and there's no argument for me with those 2. However, it'd be interesting to have, I'll be happy to share that list, or it would take a brief period of time to assemble a list of other types of committees that we could consider over time. I'd also like to just say the terms of reference for the committees in the previous term were exceptionally good, I felt, and Mr. McInnes put those together with your assistance and others. And I hope that these new terms will reflect and capture the kind of depth of composition of the committees as well as their terms of reference.
Counselor Beddoes?
Yeah, just thank you, your worship. Just a little clarification through you to staff. A select committee, we mentioned one counselor. Is there anything that's stopping us from having more than one counselor?
I think it's clear that it must be one member of council
At
on the
least one,
committee,
or-
one only.
Oh, okay.
Whereas a
That's what I wanted
standing,
clarification from staff.
standing is a minimum, well, you wouldn't really have a committee of two people, but you would have two council members matched by two members of the public. So it's in the the Local Government Act. It's
Okay,
pretty
so the
clear.
answer to my question is that it is one counselor. Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure about that. That's what I want clarification. Thank you.
Anyone can attend though. Ms. Bagnall? No, I find out I'm wrong.
In accordance with the legislation, select committees of council must have at least one member of council.
Okay, we'll get that report and that'll answer it all. Okay. All right. So we have here that council directs staff to prepare terms of reference for the following committees of council: Community Economic Development Committee and Land Use Development Committee. It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Pearson. So we'll get that along with the other Board of Variance reminder about the Health Committee and everything else. Okay, perfect. Oh, you wanted to speak? Go ahead.
I just want to remind everyone that I think ideally we would be looking at fewer committees, but hopefully taking full advantage of the committee structures and whatever options for task forces, subcommittees, so on and so forth, make sure everybody's as involved as they need to be. The nice thing about this is that if we've often had committees that went on for way too long because they weren't rolled up and sometimes they don't need to be anymore. Keeping it slim and trim allows us to provide substantive work. Ideally, also, council is recognizing the work and respecting the recommendations. Otherwise, people get really annoyed at doing the committee work and so on. So I think that just keeping it tight, making sure that they're being provided with work that we need and that we'll use is just something to keep in mind moving forward. And I like what we're doing here. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and just building on what you said through the chair is that the heavy lifting gets done and the recommendation is slow, and it's still council's prerogative to vote how they wish at the end of a recommendation. But they can work well, but again, don't get bogged down in minutia. It's time for the minutia to be discussed and open and cleared off the plate as opposed to coming forward for the regular council. I think they can work really well. Excited. Thank you.
Just to staff, what is new regarding the terms of reference is that the code of conduct applies to all committee members. So it needs to be very clear that that is expected, and that as we put the request out to members of the public, that they're also aware and willing to sign off on that as part of the application process, because that's new. Okay. Okay. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call a question. All in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously as well. Thank you. So that brings us to 6.4, which is our UBCM Asset Management Planning Grants.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report today is recommending council's support to move forward with an application to the UBCM Asset Management Planning Grant stream. This is the second stream that we're applying for this year. They have two streams in the year. This is a continuation of the existing work that was done from a GIS student that's been hired. We're going to have him continue on in the new year if we're granted these funds and support from council. And we'll have him continue on the work that he's been doing. So 3 months of the year, he'll be doing a portion of this grant work to continue just the asset recognition for Parks asset inventory project that he's been working on. And the second part of this project is one that the finance department has jumped onto, where we're looking at updating our TCA policy and also fine tuning some procedures that will just help us for recognition of two different types of assets. So one would be the assets received through capital projects, and the other for developer contributed assets. So those are two big pieces of work that we do with the financial year end in capitalizing all the assets received. And it's a joint, it's a big effort from the engineering and operations team and also the GIS coordinator and the finance team. There's quite a bit of hours of work involved and detail that's collected. And it's one of the bigger components of our financial year end. So a lot of different moving parts and departments involved in the process. So we'd like to update the policy and then update the procedures involved with that. And use these funds to do so. I think you'll in the future see us try to utilize these funds for both intakes in each year that they're available, as it's a valuable resource that's available to us, and they're relatively easy to get grants. That concludes my summary of the application. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Curry. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Just move the motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move that council support the district's $18,489 grant application to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Asset Management Grant Program and agree to provide overall grant management.
It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Would you like to speak to it?
No, it sounds awesome. And if it doesn't come through by some wild circumstance, I hope you'll come forward with a plan to keep that student on, to keep doing the work. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you.
Councillor Beddoes? Okay. The other piece I'll just add to this is that the district and our staff have done tremendous work in terms of setting up an asset managed policy, the reserve that we've just discussed, the ongoing work. You should consider looking at a UBCM Excellent Award and consider applying for one maybe in the next round. I don't recall the award categories. However, given where we've come from and where we've landed now and having that just part of regular operation work, I think is something to celebrate. So I'll leave it with you. Don't want to create more work, but sometimes you do need to celebrate the work that's happened. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Curry. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving into our correspondence section. How's everyone doing for a health break? Okay, I would request that as well, if everyone doesn't mind, if we could have a 10-minute health and wellness break, please. So to folks viewing online, we're at 2:35. If we can just come back at 2:45, please. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're at 2:45, so if I could please ask everyone to take their seats. Okay, thank you everyone for that break. We are now into our correspondence section of the agenda. And staff also did advise me that our base commander did reach out that he is in the middle of a matter and hopes to attend. So if we do have time and we're still meeting, for sure we'll make that accommodation. It's just at the outset, I had said that he wasn't here. He has been in touch, and obviously there's other matters he needs to attend to, which is where we certainly want him to be. And certainly if today doesn't work out, we'll follow up again at the next regular council meeting. Okay, thank you, everyone. So into our correspondence, our first one up here is 7.1 Park Dedication, Maple Park Terrace Development. And this was pulled and requested by Councillor Bateman. So over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. My first acknowledgement is that I left my file at home on Ellis Stream. I had a lot of talking points and comments, but I'll wing it. And I'll do fine. I'll start with what Ms. Phillips said at the outset. We can learn and go forward from this particular situation. So I think with that as a starting point, we have been learning about the situation for some time. We here at council, we received in 2021 we created the new covenant. Staff created the covenant that we signed off on for this property. There has been following that, the Friends of Ella Stream or Ella Watershed formed and have been keeping this issue very much alive, the vanishing Ella Stream and what happened. And the Ministry of, which ministry? The Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship investigated in March of this year or April. The Ella Stream Watershed Group filed a Freedom of Information request. They have received a redacted copy, I do believe, as according to Margaret Cheshire, who's spokesperson for the group. And that FOI has also been shared with district park staff. So I have a motion in the spirit of we can learn and go forward. Did you capture that motion that I sent prior to the previous council meeting? You did not. Okay. So that would have been sent the morning of the last council meeting.
Okay, I have it here. I can
Can you
forward
forward
it
over? Thank you.
to staff here. Why isn't this? Yes, so this is just. Okay, so the motion is that council, pardon me, that it should be that council direct district staff to prepare a high-level status report on the 7044 Maple Park Terrace Park dedication and its phased implementation as per the amended section 219 covenant adopted on June 27, 2022. And that this report include available information from the spring 2024 Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship Investigation number 22182 regarding Ellis Stream.
There it is.
So that's the motion you're making.
Yeah, that's the motion. And
Okay, before you
Yeah.
speak to it,
Oh,
then we
okay.
require a seconder. So looking for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Okay, go ahead and speak to it, please.
well, this is just to keep this matter alive and to discover exactly what the ministry concluded, because it is ultimately the ministry's responsibility, riparian issues of this kind. And I think we just need to see the next stage report from the district, given that the district does indeed have apparently parts of this FOI. Perhaps they can therefore report out. I'm also very curious about the park dedication as per the covenant, because time's moving on, phases are being completed. I believe park dedication was to be completed in lockstep with each phase. So I know the West Trail, I believe it is I don't have my notes. The West Trail is up along with the viewpoint for phase 3, I think that is. I think the other key point with this motion is, having heard the "we can learn and go forward" piece from Ms. Phillips, it's like, what have we learned from this process, and how do we not do it again? How do we learn? So getting that into this motion somehow would be worthwhile.
That might be a follow-up piece. Once should this pass, we get the staff report.
Yeah.
What comes next comes after that.
And also, well, Councillor St. Pierre, perhaps you'd like to speak to this around a legal opinion on.
Direct that to me, please. I'm chairing the meeting. Councillor St. Pierre.
Yes. In conversation, I was curious as to whether or not we actually had any sort of legal standing. Like, is there anything we can actually do? Is there any compensation? It was suggested, I think, by a member of the public that, through the word compensation, we could actually acquire parks, who knows? But I don't have a lot of clarity in terms of, personally as a councillor, where we might have done things differently. I would like to know. My sense is that, we do have assessments, we have environmental reports. The process actually seems fairly exhaustive in terms of actually making sure that streams are protected. Something went obviously super wrong in this particular case. And it now seems that because it went wrong, the answer seems to be, well, we've destroyed the stream, there's no riparian area, keep on going, which is more or less a little bit odd, but it puts the district, I think, in an odd situation where we're actually continuing to issue permits, continue to allow development, but from the province, we're getting, well, there's no stream there anymore, so keep going. I don't have a lot of clarity over whether or not there's anything that we can do legally or otherwise. I don't have a lot of clarity as to whether or not there's anything we need to improve in our process to make sure this doesn't happen again. It feels like the process is actually pretty good. It was just completely ignored. And then the province said, well, now there's no more stream and it's been ignored, just keep on going. Is that actually what happened? That feels like what happened, but I guess what I'm looking in a report is clarity in terms of our level of responsibility, what we could do further to avoid it, if anything, because, or maybe just through your worship, a question to staff on that.
Okay, so I see some hands from staff, so I'll go over to Ms. Gray and then Mr. Marshall.
Okay, sorry, apologies. I don't know what Mr. Marshall's going to say, but I was just going to state, not all that information, like, we may not be able to present all that information publicly, depending on which rabbit hole we're going down here, to gather all this information. So there could be a two-prong report. They could be public facing, and then potentially, depending when you're mentioning legal potential, then that obviously would not be a public conversation. So just to manage expectations of what could be shared publicly. We'll find the balance when, if this motion passes, we'll look into it and most likely would have to provide two different reports. I know council did receive an update on this a while ago, but we can look back to that and either add to that report or bring it back for further discussion.
That's understood. Yeah, Mr. Marshall?
Yeah, your worship, members of council. Adding to what Ms. Gray said is that I had a fair bit of opportunity to delve fairly deeply into this application. It goes back to a development permit in 2012. And that development permit is over 250 pages of documentation. There are a lot of recommendations and things within. There's, I think, 5 separate reports that it addresses. There is years of toing and froing between the previous owner and developer and council. There's previous staff. There's a lot of communication between developer and staff. There's a new covenant. There's new ownership. There's provincial, like it is a rabbit hole, and I'm not saying that there aren't lessons to be learned, and I've certainly done my best to try and put a noose around some of the issues and try and bring it back on track. But I just warn you that it's not a small thing you're asking staff to do to look into this. And I guess my question to you is, to what length or to what depth are you looking for us to go into this? Because like I say, I could spend a great deal of time and already have spent a great deal of time looking through the whole history of this particular development. And yes, there are plenty of blame to go around. And I'm not saying that, it doesn't need to be uncovered, doesn't need to be lessons learned from, but I just would like to get some direction on kind of what level of pursuit you're looking for staff to go into on this particular application.
Okay, go back to the mover.
Yeah, so I was clear there at high level. So these are the magic words, meaning we want an executive summary of where things stand today regarding both the covenant and Ellis Stream. And maybe some clarity about where and I think it's been presented previously, clarity around district ability and responsibility over this matter.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I've had an opportunity to look at all those reports as well, because this has come before council before. I'm not really interested in that rabbit hole myself. I'm much more interested in knowing what can we do in the future if we have similar development, and we do always. And what's our process? How robust it is in terms of protecting these streams? And if someone decides to fill in the stream, are we gonna have the same thing happen again? I want to know, how do we avoid right now?
Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead. Excuse me. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
I'm more interested in that particular piece of how, as a district, are we making sure this never happens again? What's our process for that? And what's our recourse if, like, right now it feels like things moved ahead in ways they shouldn't have, and then because they did, they're being allowed to go further. Obviously, that's not agreeable. I get that. But I'm very interested in finding out how we can avoid this happening again. And this doesn't feel like a rabbit hole. This is just what are our what are our tools? And what's our level of responsibility with this? The legal opinion sounds like a completely different piece to me and feels like a different piece. And then there's the separate question as, do we have any ability to stop what's happening right now? So there's actually three questions for me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, this is more than an interesting file, and I'm really not. I don't want to look at every little thing, but I did hear that there might be a remedy to it now. Now, the way I see it, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is the province dropped the ball. They did an investigation and said, yeah, it has been screwed, and too bad, nothing we can do about it now. But I understand there might be something that we can do about it. And if so, what authority do we have to order, and I'm asking to your worship, to staff, what authority do we have to order the developer to remedy the situation, or is it strictly a provincial matter?
Through your worship, I think at this stage, I don't feel comfortable saying things publicly. This has been a very complicated file. I think we'd need to regroup at a staff level and just confirm we're all speaking the same language and talking about the same things. I just want to be sensitive to any potential legal opinions we've received over the years, et cetera, on releasing that publicly. Just, this has kind of pivoted a little bit more from what I thought the initial report was going to be.
Can I follow up, please?
Yeah.
To your worship, to staff. Okay, so then we go back to this report, and I guess what's bothering me about this is the degree of what we're looking into. I would want a simplistic type of answer. Is it fixable? And if it's fixable, can we order it to be fixable? And that's what I'd like staff to do. If they have to report to us in camera, they can report to us in camera. But this has gone on quite some time, and I'm sort of appalled at the province, but then again, that's nothing new. We won't go into that. So if we pass this motion, is it doable, or are you still looking for some clarity as how deep to go? I hear staff saying that, it's 500 pages and this and that, and put a lot of effort into it. I want just some basic answers. So if we pass this, can you come back to us for the next meeting and give us an update?
Through your worship, maybe not the next meeting because that's Monday, but maybe the meeting after.
So
It's time to write the report that would have already been due
Yeah.
for the agenda that gets published Thursday. So realistically, it wouldn't be on Monday, but I would say that at least for me, I have enough direction from this. I understand what council wants to at least provide some preliminary information to you. And if that sparks more resolutions or further investigation at the request of council, then we can definitely bring back further reports. But I think we can at least give you, because I know some other information's been provided to council in the past. We can kind of make sure Mr. Marshall is aware of some of the other reports that have gone forward historically, and then go from there.
The problem I'm having is the high level status report and a preliminary report. You're saying, I would like a preliminary report. I don't know how high level status, and I'm not even sure what that means. I certainly want to know if there's a remedy here. So I know it's going back to wordsmithing again. As what's expected of staff. I hear one staff member saying that, it's a rabbit hole. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for something more simplistic. So if we pass this, can we get an overview report at the next available staff meeting or next available council meeting?
So what I heard just the mover say is it is just that overview, high level,
Okay.
same type of thing, not the full 200 or whatever page grab, but just that. And then I think that might lead to more questions, and
I'm okay with that.
We'll get there,
I
but
wasn't
that's
quite
the
sure where
intent.
we're going with this, and I know that we're again dealing with the province, and I haven't seen the document, redacted document, but well, I know. Well, that goes to freedom of information. If they got it, why don't we have it? I mean, if it's available to them, why isn't it available to us?
well,
And what are we gonna do with it when we get it? Because it may not be in our jurisdiction to do anything about it. but there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and that's where we go to staff. You can look into that, give us a report. Thanks, great.
Well, that's starting somewhere anyway, and I appreciate, I am in support of this. It's been, you know, and I appreciate that staff have changed, councils have changed, the residents have remained the same largely through all of this. And yeah, there's different articles over the years where there's been this and that that's happened. I'm quoted as saying that it's been just pure hellfire for the residents, which it seemingly remains that case. So that's where I think we'll get this and continue on from there. Yeah, there's blasting boulders, dust, everything. So,
Metal, grinding on metal, the bashing across every morning, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, that's all and then the blasting.
yeah, no, yeah, I understand. Okay, so I'll call the question on this, please. All those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We are going to pivot to our staff sergeant. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox, for joining us today. It was wonderful to see you, and sorry that we weren't able to get to your presentation or was very brief the last time. So welcome back. We're happy to have you. So we're just going to change as indicated from the outset that when Mr. Wilcox arrives, that will change in the order of the agenda. So here we are.
Mayor Tate, members of council, thank you very much for having me here again today. I know the last meeting, there was lots of important business to get to, and I appreciate you giving me more time today. Like I said before, we have more of a wholesome quarterly report because there's going to be two, but there's also going to be some extra stuff at the end that I think is very important to go over, especially for the growing police service here in Sooke. So I know we went through it quickly yesterday, and I'll provide some more detail on some of the numbers that are there. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just before we begin, we're especially for the public that are watching here today and online, just a reminder that, you know, there's obviously a 911 service through our e-com program, but there's also lots of reasons to call police for non-emergency incidents. There could be for example, suspicious person, it could be an online issue that's happening, online harassment. Even if you don't know who the suspect is, to report, or for example, report ongoing crimes in your area. For example, if there's speeders on your road, or you have, you're constantly seeing issues in the school zone, people running stop signs, any type of traffic type of offenses or suspicious behavior. You see somebody that isn't doing something maybe they're not supposed to do, may not necessarily be illegal, but it could be suspicious and it's causing issues in your neighborhood. This is just the a reminder for the public that we do have a non-emergency line. It's operated 24/7, either by our wonderful office staff, or it's operated by our e-com, and they can get in touch with an officer anytime. So as a reminder, these are the performance plans priorities for the Sooke detachment. The first, which is well, they're all critical, but this one is something that the public will see a lot more, is our enhanced road safety initiative, obviously targeting impaired and aggressive driving that's happening in Sooke. We're going to go through some of the impaired numbers later on, but that's one of our priorities. Another one is crime reduction. And I've said this publicly and in council a number of times before. I believe that a vast majority of our, not a vast majority of our crime, but there's a small segment of people that are causing a lot more of the crime that we see in the community. That's why we have a prolific offender initiative that's in there where we can actually target those. Now, with the additional resources that we're getting, we can start that investigative unit, and that's going to enhance our ability to be able to deal with those prolific offenders, which is going to be critical when we're wearing a uniform, we're out on the road, and we're we're responding to 911 calls for service. We can't always target those as best as, or those offenders as much as we'd like to. We're going to have a more enhanced ability soon. Accountability and good governance. People want to see us in the community. They want to see us in the schools. And that's something that we want to do more of. It's very, very important. Obviously, we would be nowhere without our members and our employees, and we want to make sure that they are taken care of. Policing is a very tough job, and we have to take care of our people, and then they can take care of the community. And last but not least is our reconciliation initiatives with their Indigenous partners. So an update on 24/7 policing. So as I briefly mentioned before, the next time I appear before you for a quarterly meeting, we should have it in place, ready to go and active, which is very exciting for everybody. And it's going to be a large policing service enhancement for the community. Now, as a reminder, if you call today, you'll always get a police officer 24/7. It's just there's going to be more police on the road for longer, and we're not going to be on call anymore, which is going to enhance our response times, and it's going to enhance our visibility as well. So we're very lucky here in Sooke, one, because we live here and we live in such a wonderful community, and luckily it's an easy place to bring experienced RCMP members in. All my new members I've gotten the past year are high quality, experienced police officers. And we're getting them internally from other detachments, including in the back, my operations sergeant, Kara Gubbins, who's a very experienced, very talented member, and we're very lucky to get her here in Sooke. We also have more experienced police officers actually coming from municipal agencies. They're coming to the RCMP and they're asking to come to Sooke. So this is very positive for us. So as I briefly mentioned before, I am fully staffed. Now, policing is a hard job. There's going to be sometimes people off on injuries or occupational stress injuries or MAT, PATs, that sort of thing. But in terms of police officers actually positioned in Sooke, I'm completely full and I'm almost running at 100%. Not quite, but I'm pretty darn close. So that's very exciting. That allows us to transition to 24/7 policing.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
When you say that the officers are applying specifically to come here, what would you share as the draw? Good governance? Is it the trails? Good food? Like, is it like what exactly makes it? So I'm curious.
It's a combination of factors. Absolutely, good governance is one of them. But it's a combination, and it's very similar to why a lot of people are attracted to Sooke. So it's a beautiful community with wonderful people that live in there. There's it fits a lifestyle for a lot of police officers, but also a lot of other people that choose to live here. It's a family-oriented community. There's tons to do outside. Obviously, we're right there on the ocean. I'm a fisherman, so that's very easy access for that. The school system is wonderful, and there's a large recreational opportunity. Like the kids can enroll their kids in hockey and soccer and that sort of thing. And one of the first things that I saw when I first transferred here was that it's just a very family oriented community. Not everybody has families, but for a lot of these members, that's very important for them, is to have that sense of community. So, and I also find that there's less hustle and bustle as opposed to, and that's a big draw. They don't want to be dealing with, the congestion that maybe a larger center like, somewhere in the Lower Mainland has, right? So this is more of a community feel. People know each other, but it's also growing a lot as well. So that would be my take on it. But I think it would be I think a lot of people would have a similar answer for that as well. So with officers applying specifically to come to Sooke under the Experienced Police Officer Program, they have a choice of where they want to go, because we're getting a trained, experienced police officer in the province of British Columbia or elsewhere. If we're getting all of that talent here as through the RCMP as an organization. So if they ask to come to Sooke, or if they ask to go to Port Hardy, if they ask to go to Prince George, they can go there. We'll give them that opportunity to come here. And we're very happy to have 2 of them here from outside agencies. And finally, in 2025, like I mentioned before, we'll have our GIS unit. So I've talked a little bit about that. So as we see here, this is a very simple graph in regards to the amount of calls for service that we have per year. I've done over the past 3 years, and this is all year to date. And I believe the cutoff date, yes, it was October 10th was the cutoff date for our calls for service. So you can see here that's from last year, we're up 7% year to date for calls of service. Now this can be anything. This could be, very low priority calls, and it could be high priority calls, but these are just the amount of times that people have called us. We're anticipating approximately 5,800 calls for service in 2024, but that's just a projection based off of today's year to date numbers. I also did projections out to 2030. Obviously, these are projections. You can input different percentages here, but this is just to give a rough idea of what I'm expecting as the detachment commander for files up until 2030. And when I was doing this, I realized that 2030 is really only 5 years away. It sounds like it's far away, but it's really not. This is essentially the 5-year projected calls that we have. So I inputted this in 2 different ways. In the orange bar was 7% growth per year. I did 7% because that's what we've seen so far this year. We're up 7% year to date. The green bar, I did a more conservative route, and I did a 3.5% compounded rate of growth for that. So as you can see, by about 2030, we're going to be in between 7,100 and 8,700 calls for service. These aren't always criminal matters. People call us for all sorts of different things that may not be criminally related, but these are calls for service that are going to happen in the community. I'm also assuming that Sooke is going to continue to grow. Obviously, we'll know more about that, or more about the population growth for our next census, but I'm planning that Sooke is going to continue to grow at the rate that's been growing really in the last 10, 15 years. So this is a more zoomed in model just for the quarter. So this is the quarter from April to June. So in that quarter alone, that 3 months, we've received 1,147 calls for service. We're up 14% from the same quarter of last year. Now, with any stats, you can obviously get outliers. You can obviously get things that are lower or higher. What I'm always looking for is trends. And over the course of these slides, you're going to see that there's going to be trends that are in place for calls for service. And I'll explain why I believe that's happening at the end. So this is July to September. So this is the next quarter. And we've received in that period 1,213 calls for service. And last year's quarter, during the same quarter, is 1,000 or about 1,100 calls for service. It's up from the previous 2 years, but 2022 had a little bit more. But saying that, we're up 9% from the same quarter of last year. So mental health calls for service are actually down. So from June to that's supposed to say April to June, my apologies. We, for this year, we've only received 33 calls for service when it comes to mental health needs. Now, as a reminder to council, this is when people are in crisis. So when it could be something from somebody's mentioning suicidal tendencies, or they're trying to actively harm themselves, or they want to harm somebody else because of their mental health condition. These are when people are in crisis, and we have to intervene. And typically these are straight 911 calls. You can see last quarter, it was 64. So we're down about half. And July to September, you're going to see kind of the same trend. We've received 32 calls for service, and we had 38 previously. Now you'll see 2022, there's 81 calls for service in a 3-month period. That's quite high. And I alluded to this a little bit during our last meeting, but why I believe that happened is why it's so down. It's not because there's necessarily less crises out there, but sometimes we might have 1 or 2 individuals in the community that can spike up those numbers. So we may have to intervene sometimes daily or at least quite regularly. Now, one of the reasons why I believe this is gone is because we had some wonderful members that would actually contact these people every morning just to see how their day was going, just to see how they were doing, and sometimes have coffee with them. And that would bring them down for that day. And we would develop that rapport with them. And these are things that we obviously can't do with everyone, but in this case, in this particular, with these particular people, this was a very effective strategy. And I believe that's why it's made those stats go down. Because I can show stats here, and these are numbers on a screen, and it does show that trend, but behind every stat is a story and a situation that happens. Okay, so these are mischief calls for service. These are mischief is essentially when property is damaged, or it could be loss of enjoyment of somebody's property. And it's a good barometer. It's not break and enters, but it's a good barometer to determine if there's smaller crime that are happening in the community. If somebody has their car window broken, or so they had something vandalized, or something along those lines. So it's not break and enters, but it kind of gives us a good gauge of what's happening really out in the community when it comes to property crime. So with this is April to June for the last 3 years in that quarter. So from April to June of 2024, we had our highest stats out of that 3-year period, and we're at 62 calls for service when it comes to mischief. And this could be under $5,000 or over $5,000, which are two separate offenses. So it's an increase of 29%. You can see in 2022 and 2023, those stats were pretty level. So we've had a fairly big jump in from 2023. So again, the trend is still up for this. So from July to September in this past quarter, you'll see we're up 17% from 2023 and a little bit more from 2022. Impaired investigations. So this is something that I often talk about at council meetings, and I always want to bring it to council's attention because it's such an important offense that we need to investigate. I encourage my members to be out on the road as much as they can, and to look for people that are impaired by alcohol or people that are impaired by drugs. So in this case, we're up quite considerably from the same period in 2023. Again, this is April to June. So we're up almost 3x, 300% from the same time last year. Now, I attribute this to maybe there's not necessarily, even though that stat looks like there's a lot more impaired drivers on the road, but really this is because we have more police officers on the road. So impaired operation investigations are typically self-generated. Yes, people often call impaired drivers in, or people they believe are impaired, and these are actual impaired. Sometimes we'll get a call and it'll be, hey, this vehicle's impaired, but it could be somebody that's on their phone, or it could be somebody that is not paying attention, or it could be somebody that maybe shouldn't be driving because they have some sort of medical impairment. So with this quarter, you'll see that we are almost, I'd say about 70 or 80% higher than the same period of 2023, but about the same from 2022. Again, I attribute that to we are fully staffed. So we just have more police officers on the road, which is a good thing. So Councillor St. Pierre, you had a very interesting question, and I dove into this, and this is a bit of an eye chart, so please bear with me here. So just a reminder for council, the question from Councillor St. Pierre was, is there any link, and I'm paraphrasing, so please forgive me, but is there any link between the amount of impaired drivers that you take off the road and a reduction or potentially an increase in motor vehicle collisions with injuries or deaths? So it's a bit of an eye chart, and with the motor vehicle fatalities, I should have used a different color here, so it's kind of hard to see. But there's three bars there. So the light green bar is the amount of impaired drivers that we've caught. And I went back to 2018. Before that, we start purging certain investigations. So this is the most accurate data that I can get. So I went back to 2018, which gives us a good gauge. And this was interesting because I didn't know the answer to this. So in 2018, we'll start there. You'd see that we got 52 impaired drivers in the district of Sooke. And the dark green bar is motor vehicle collisions with injuries in Sooke. So this could be anything from maybe somebody, got seatbelt rash, maybe they got a bruise, to very, very serious injuries where they had to be taken to the hospital and maybe this can change their life. So there's no differentiation for that for this particular graph. But there are, and the yellow one, which I should have chosen a different color, so it's hard to see, but that's our fatalities. And for most years, it's either 0 or 1. So the question is, are these two stats correlated? So I put a ratio on the bottom left-hand corner, and essentially what you want is the lower ratio. So in 2018, you have a ratio of 0.61. So for every impaired that we get, there is 0.61 motor vehicle incidences with injuries. So again, you want that ratio to be as close to 0 as humanly possible. So 2018 was our least productive year. We only got 52 impaired drivers. Now, if we go to the next year, which is 2019, you have 84 impaired drivers and you have 37 motor vehicle collisions. So your ratio is now 0.44. Now, if we go to this year, actually, we have the best ratio so far. And this is just year to date, mind you. So obviously the year's not over. So we've gone 73 impaired drivers and we only have 16 motor vehicle collisions with injuries. Saying that, we did have a fatality this year. But as you can see, we have had a lot of success with impaired drivers and our motor vehicle collisions have gone down. Now, there's an element of chance in here, and there's these stats could be looked at a little bit differently, but I want to point your attention to 2022, where that was our best year for getting impaired drivers. We had 102 impaired drivers that we caught, and we only had 24 collisions, which brings the ratio down to 0.23. So we're a little bit lower this year. But what I can determine just from this amount of, just from this chart alone, is that the more impaired drivers that we get, the less motor vehicle collisions with injuries that we do get. Now, I know there's a lot of different research that's out there, but this is just what I was able to find with mine. Yes.
I would tend to suggest also that if there's a lot more officers out on the road looking for impaired drivers, the other drivers are more likely to be more careful, which may also contribute.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And there could be a lot of reasons for why this is happening, but just from looking at the data just alone, this is very encouraging, because I assumed that if we are taking more impaired drivers off the road, there's going to be less collisions. That just seems very logical. But this is the first time I looked at it with, locally, where it's actually backed up with data. So it's very interesting that way. So it's a bit of an eye chart. My apologies, but I think it shows I guess the relationship between the two elements. So
before you're through the chair, just before you leave the impaired, how do those stats roll out with a community the same size? Like you're, in a quarter, you're getting 70 to 100. Is that sort of consistent throughout the province? Is that sort of?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a good question. I've always said that, like, we I believe we have higher impaired stats than what we should have. I don't have the data strictly in front of me, so I'm going off my memory, and I can look it up and I can be proven wrong. Don't get me wrong. But when I see that a community of 15,000 people and we're getting 100 impaired drivers, that's just what we're getting. That doesn't include what's on the road. And I'm also surprised at that number too, because we don't have a bar district. You know, typically, like if you look at any municipality with a downtown core, they'll have a bar district, and they might have nightclubs, or they might have larger pubs, and people will, yes, there's taxi services and ride hailing services and that sort of thing. But people will also be more, it's just math at the end of the day. There's just going to be more people on the road, and a certain percentage of those are going to, they're going to drive drunk. But if you don't have that, then it eliminates that math. So I don't know if this is necessarily people that are, you know, maybe coming in from, you know, Victoria or the West Shore area or Saanich, or it's just local. But most of these individuals are local, but we do have tourists that do come here, and we do interact with them in these matters. But I think it's much too high. Like having one is too high at the end of the day, but this just seems to be higher than what it should be. But I don't have the data in front of me to back that up.
And just a follow-up question. I actually, because I asked that similar question, is it tourists coming through? And I'm wondering if it's because we don't have bars, that people have to go to Colwood, Langford, other places to drink and then drive home. So just kind of, I know it's probably not relevant to the conversation, but.
Well, the other thought there is, in other places, are people more able to walk home because we're spread out? It may not be easy to choose that. Like if you live in proximity to certain places, you would walk, but because of where we're spread out, people would say, okay, well, I can drive, and then you're not. I don't know. I think maybe over time we'll get more information. Be curious to know if there's certain hours that there's a higher, what does it tie into?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's good something to bring up, and the logic is very sound. There's no way that I can disagree with any of that, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And in terms of the time, certainly when I first joined as a police officer, I always thought like, oh, well, only drunk drivers are on the road, you know, in the evening or late at night, coming back from, you know, maybe the pub or that sort of thing. And the answer is no. Like we do catch a lot of impaired drivers in the morning, in the afternoon. Like, you know, if, for example, like if somebody has a massive dependency on alcohol, they wait till the liquor store opens at 11 o'clock. And they will go there at 11 o'clock, and they may still be intoxicated. There's people that, you know, they appear sober when they're twice over the legal limit, because they're constantly consuming alcohol and they're so dependent on it. But they may have a completely rational conversation with you. So it was very eye-opening for me during my career, but it seems to be all throughout the day. Now I'd say there's more at night, you know, but we catch them kind of whenever. So.
Councillor St. Pierre, did you have another question? No. Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Beddoes.
No, I wasn't the question. I'm just thankful you're catching them. So thanks very much for your work. It's nice to have more officers on the road. And even if you just got one more, that's one more risk that my family doesn't have to go through. Thanks.
And I appreciate that, and it's my officers that are doing that, and they're very diligent with getting out there. We're very experienced officers, and they're very good at catching impaired drivers. And I've never quite seen the talent that we have in this detachment to catch them, and that's why we have that, and we're continuing to bring that talent in. So I will bring that message back to my officers, and it's all them. So, yeah, well, having one impaired driver is too much, but it's encouraging when we're getting, call it 100 impaired drivers a year, you know, for example, roughly, our motor vehicle collisions with injuries are going down. Because like I said, every stat is a story. That could be, you know, a mother with their children. That could be, you know, one of our local seniors. That could be a brand new driver, and that's their first time driving, and they, you know, they get hit by an impaired driver. So all these stats are one thing, but, you know, my officers are the ones that that are that see the stories behind that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here. So this is something a little bit different, but it sheds a different lens on how our operations happen at the detachment. I'm always of the belief that, you know, the vast majority of people are very smart. They're very intelligent. They're very rational. And if we all have the same experiences and the same information, then we'll often come to the same conclusion. Now, we all have different opinions on things because we have different experiences, and that's okay. We all don't lead the same life. But why I bring that up is because I wanted to, I guess, shed some light on some of those stats turning into stories of what my officers deal with on a bit of a daily basis. So this is a thought exercise on service demands during a typical shift that we have in Sooke. They include two things. They include our 911 response, so us actually responding to the incident, but they also include our investigation, paperwork, and court time afterwards. The goal of this is to provide an example of how officers' time is distributed during a typical shift, both operationally and administratively. So there's going to be two slides that are shown. The first slide is it's a fictional example of a typical shift that we have on any given day or any given night. It's used to represent typical calls for service members may receive during a normal shift and the other demands that we have. The second slide is going to show the investigational demands on the officer's time, concluding those calls for service. This will include how long it takes to do a typical investigation and court time. So if we go here, before I go through this, every single one of those priorities and calls on there are important to the person that's calling it in. As a 911 response, we have to prioritize what we go to, but we go to everything. And we have a couple different things here. We could have potentially a domestic assault, somebody who's suicidal, but we can also just have a suspicious person. But with that suspicious person, it could be somebody who may be elderly on a street. They live by themselves and they see somebody at 9 o'clock at night hanging around on their street and they shouldn't be there. They're scared. They call police. And they've never called police before. And this could be something that causes them a lot of stress and anxiety. Is that more important than a domestic assault? It isn't, but we go to both. And for that person that's calling it in, it's very important to them. So we want to maintain that service level for them. So for this, we're doing an example of a 3 constable shift. So I know there's 16 officers that are here. This includes a staff sergeant, a sergeant, corporals, but all our officers don't work every day. So this is just a typical shift. And you can say it's a day shift or it's a night shift. And again, all of these are fictional, but they're just meant to describe kind of what we see. So in this case, we have 3 officers that are working and we have a domestic assault that comes in. So for something like that, and to give the background, and it's not just a stat, it could be something like we get a call that there's a partner and they were assaulted by their other partner. They have a black eye. They were hit multiple times. They're scared and they're hiding from their other partner. So for something like that, that is a priority 1. We go right away. Later on in the shift, we may have a suicidal person. So they maybe told a loved one that they want to harm themselves or end their life. So obviously that is also another priority and we have to go to that. Like we drop everything and we go to something like that. Also during the shift, or maybe at the same time, we had a motor vehicle crash. In this case, it's a fender bender, but it's a mom coming back from school and they got hit from behind. Not too fast, but they're obviously like very scared and they have, say, a 10-year-old in the car. And this is very traumatic for them. So lots of traffic during this case. We'll say it's 3 o'clock. And this is something that they're looking for service for. And then we have that suspicious person that I mentioned. Again, very important for those people. But with the type of calls that we have here, we have to make sure that we prioritize them, but we go to all of them. So another one, we have somebody, they came home from work one day and they see that the back car window was was busted. Nothing was taken, but somebody just threw a rock through the window. And then they asked themselves, was I targeted by somebody? Why would somebody do this? Is this a random act of violence? Is this just somebody that's walking by and maybe they didn't like my truck? Will this happen again? So they live in a lot of anxiety after something like this happens. And we go there, we investigate it. We may find the person, we may not find the person. So we have another one here. So online threats. So somebody was on Facebook, for example, and they're commenting back and forth with somebody, and then somebody direct messages them and threatens them. Nothing too serious, but they say some things that obviously causes person a lot of concern, and maybe they're talking about a local issue, or maybe they're talking about whatever it may be. But that obviously causes them concern. So, but we're still dealing maybe at this point with the domestic assault. But then we have another one that comes in and saying, oh, a friend of mine's threatening me, and I don't really want to say too much. So we're still dealing with maybe the suicidal person or the domestic assault. But in that case, for the online threats, it's actually another domestic. So it's an ex-boyfriend that is threatening to do this person physical harm and to damage their property. But we don't know that until we contact that person. So, because sometimes people they're very nervous, and we recognize that to come to the police. And then we have an impaired driver. So one of my officers on the way back, they notice somebody that's weaving a lot, and they pull them over, and they're impaired, and they execute that investigation. So this is a typical day. This could be today, this could be yesterday, this could be tomorrow. But we have additional priorities here that the community is asking us to do. And these are all very important. These are things that I want to do, and I want to do them well. And unfortunately, we can't always do them because we only have so much time. And our main premise is the core policing, is responding to those calls for service. So one, schools visits, like interacting more with the school. We're not at the schools as much as I would like to be. We try our best, but it's difficult when we're dealing with maybe some of those things. On a slower day, like sometimes we don't have this many calls for service. We have more time to do those things. I've personally gone to the school and read to the kids, and so has some of my other officers, and we interact with the youth as much as we can, but we just don't do it enough, unfortunately. A lot of the members that I have at my detachment, like, they're parents, they're volunteers, they're coaches. So you have that personality that works really well with those students, but it's just a time thing at the end of the day. Community events. We had such a wonderful community event with the police versus fire baseball game, which raised a ton of money. Big thank you again publicly to the Sooke Lions Club for helping, and for all our volunteers, and the Sooke Fire Department, East Sooke Fire Department, Otter Point, Metchosin. Those are things I want to have more of. And often my members, we love doing it. So we often do that off the side of our desk. But unfortunately, if an event happens and then we have a priority call for service, then we're kind of leaving, right? So we manage the baseball game so that wouldn't happen. But this could be really anything, right? This could be maybe like a DARE event, or it could be like a basketball pickup game with the youth, or a dodgeball game, or whatever it may be. Speed enforcement is another thing. Now, the good news on that front is we do have Speed Watch up and running. I briefly mentioned that, but in 4 deployments, they did over 1,100. They checked over 1,100 vehicles, which is phenomenal. 1,100 in 4 deployments. And that's one of our APP priorities. We have our stats when it comes to traffic are a lot higher than what they used to be, because more members are out on the road. We're deploying them more. But this is something that we don't have necessarily a dedicated position to strictly do, and not just speed enforcement, but traffic in general. So prohibited drivers, impaired drivers, distracted drivers, speed, that sort of thing. Park patrols, Ed McGregor Park, and other parks, foot patrols, that sort of thing. This is something that has shown a lot of success in the past, and our presence alone will often deter people from committing types of crime. We can't always do this because we may be dealing with a 911 response. Obviously, training, that's something that all officers do. We have mandatory training, but we also have, I want to enhance my officers' skills and abilities. So I want that drug recognition expert on the road, because it's not just alcohol, it's maybe prescription drugs, like overtaking those, or it could be illegal drugs and then they're driving, and we need experts on the road to be able to process those people. It could be interviewing, child interviewing. Very, very sensitive thing to do. And you need special training to do that. I want my officers to be able to do that. We have that, but these are the types of things that that we really try and promote and find time for them to do it. Drug enforcement is another one. Prolific offender management. And then we always have our courts. So this is just kind of a background on something we may encounter. The next slide, one of the final slides, is the investigation time it takes and response time for that. So I tried to be as specific as I can. And the premise of this is these are the routine, or I shouldn't say routine, the average types of calls that we get. So the average domestic assault, the average suspicious person, the average impaired driver. So let's start with the first domestic assault that comes in. It's always going to be a multiple officer response. These are very high risk for my officers. And there's going to be at least 2 police officers that attend. If I only have 3 police officers working, that's 67% of my workforce. Like I said, I may have more officers working, I may not, but I'm just using these as, for the purposes of this. So how long does these things take? Well, the answer is it kind of depends. I put 2 to 10 hours. Now, what does that exactly mean? A 2-hour response would be something that's very basic. Perhaps a neighbor called something in, and you know what? There's 2 partners, they're yelling at each other because they were arguing over what's for dinner. And that's all that happened. That's a pretty quick response. Now, we respond to that, our driving time, coming back, and then doing the associated checks and safety plans that we need to do. You know what? We can probably do that in about 2 hours. But for example, in the example that I gave you previously, say there's a criminal charge that happens, say there's an assault, say there's a threat, say it's worse, it's assault causing bodily harm, there's a really bad assault that happens. And unfortunately, that could take 10 hours for 2 officers. Maybe we have to bring that person in, and they have to, because it's such a dangerous situation, we have to bring them before a justice of the peace or a judge within 24 hours. So that time will essentially bench my officers for maybe an entire shift, because they have to write those court briefs. They have to disclose to the courts exactly what happened, so we can do a proper bail hearing. And these processes are processes that are baked in our legislation that we have, in our case law, and it's nothing that I or anybody else can really shorten, because it comes back down to the end of the day, proper investigation, especially for these high risk calls, and disclosure. Now, court, for something like this, if it goes to court, they don't always go to court, but often we're called to court. It can take anywhere between 4 hours, so half a day, or it could be 2 days, because typically police will testify towards the end of the trial after all the witnesses have testified. So I've certainly found myself in court sitting there for a day or 2 before I'm able to testify. So the suicidal person, the mental health act that I talked about before. And in my previous slides, I can't remember the exact number, but last quarter we had 35 or whatever it may be. So if it's, and we deal with this often, sometimes somebody is they're kind of on the brink, and maybe they don't have anybody else in their life. And one of my officers comes there, they show them compassion, and they speak with these individuals that are in crisis, and perhaps they don't need to go to the hospital. Perhaps they don't need to see a doctor. And that's a win. We've managed it, because we always do that assessment when we're there. Maybe, and that usually there's 2 officers that respond to that. Maybe that only takes 2 hours, because we talk to them for, longer than a few minutes. We want to make sure they're okay. We want to make sure there's a safety plan. But if we have to bring somebody into the hospital, it could take a lot longer. So the typical hospital wait time is kind of around, the 2 hour mark, which we're working on to reduce that. But sometimes we're in there all day. So, and that's why I put the 10 hours thing. I've personally had people who I've had to apprehend under the Mental Health Act, and I've been there for my entire shift, and I got the file right at the beginning of my shift. So I can't control that at all, but that's just a reality and something that we have to manage during our operational shifts. Obviously, I didn't put any court for that because that's not a criminal offense. Collisions, 1 to 5 hours. So the example that I gave, would fall right into that. And if we had to issue a fine for somebody, maybe somebody's falling too close, maybe they're talking on their cell phone, we issue them a ticket. If they dispute that, that's their right. They can dispute it. But we're gone to court for about 4 hours. Suspicious person, usually those are a lot quicker, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they take a lot longer, and a lot of them will be around that 1 or 2 hour mark, but it's very easy that it can go a lot longer. It depends on what the situation is. Mischief is the same, and you kind of get the idea. The harassment I put at 1 to 10 hours because, again, we don't know what it is, right? There could be just some simple comments that are said online and we can deal with it quite quickly, or it could be something that's ongoing and going on for quite a while. And that can lead to court time as well. So more serious investigations such as serious assaults, sexual assaults, firearms offenses, drug trafficking, they can take days or even months to investigate. This is to ensure that we do a complete investigation and we put the best package that we can together for Crown so that they can do the charge approval. So there's a big range, but the purpose of this is to show that how an officer's time can really get eaten up during the day with just kind of some standard calls. Now I realize most people in the public, they'll never see these type of things. But for our officers, I would like to tell you what we just came back from, but I can't. We never know what's going to come on the radio. And sometimes it takes a long time to do that. I can tell you, last file we came at, I'm going to have an officer off the road for the rest of the day because they have to deal with that. So, and that reduces our time to be able to go to the schools or maybe do speed enforcement or do a patrol at Ed McGregor. Saying that, all those things do get done. It's just about managing that time and those resources, these resources properly. And also to show that the response to a call, like we're a 911 response unit, but we're also an investigation unit. And the investigational part of it takes up a vast majority of our time. For domestic assault, for example, we set up safety plans with people to make sure that if something happens again, they know exactly what to do above and beyond calling 911. But perhaps there's kids involved and they witness the violence. And we have to liaise with MCFD to make sure that those children are safe. So there's a lot of considerations that we have to take when we're dealing with these different types of calls. And then obviously if we get something serious, like those are serious, but more serious on the scale, perhaps a serious assault or a sex assault, that can take a long time because at the end of the day, that's a person at the end of the call and maybe their life is completely collapsing. The walls are coming in and they have nobody else to help them. That's where my officers step in to help. Thank you very much. I know that was long, but again, I appreciate council giving me the time to come in and do this presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation and just for the in-depth work because it helps us rather than just receiving, here's the monthly call volume and what goes behind all of that. It just gives us a sense, okay, this makes sense now. When we get questions asked, like, how come you can't just put some cars out on this road or that road to deal with the speeders? Well, it's all of these other pieces that are important in the community. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, just with the resources that you have. It just helps inform all of our planning. I also wonder sometimes as things improve, I know that the wait time in emergency is long, but as more practitioners on board and the like, would that then decrease the time that our officers are waiting there? or the advocacy work we've done around getting more mental health supports here could help like lift that. That was, it just provides other people on the ground to work with some of our vulnerable populations. You also hear sometimes where, I guess the default is to call the mayor and people are sharing things with me. I'm like, I really think you should report that to the RCMP. Well, they're really busy. And I'm like, I can listen to you, but I'm really not qualified to, like, now I need to take the day off after hearing that. But I appreciate that people feel they can call and trust and talk to me. But in some cases it's more like, no, I'd really encourage you to go back and phone the RCMP on that. And because I think that's important for whatever. So, and certainly in the odd incidents that I've had since I've lived here, there's always been a follow-up and a response, which I'm grateful for, whether it's theft from my car or just online not fun stuff or whatever, that there's always someone calling. So I really appreciate all that you're doing. And I wonder sometimes as we have more officers out there, we'll get more, like the crime rate will go up because more people are being caught. It seems odd, but I that would be reasonable, right? Like as more officers are out and like the impaired, you're finding them. They've always been there. So I guess it just seems like an odd trend to have that as we increase our policing and your boots on the ground, that our crime rate will go up as a result because you're actually able to charge and convict people. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it is, and there's there's a lot of there's a lot of gray area as well because for the impaired slide, for example, yes, like we can see that because there's more officers out on the road, our impaired stats are going to go up. But then our impaired stats went up. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. But from my years of experience policing and dealing with prolific offenders, when we target certain types of crimes or certain individuals, like for the mental health calls for service, and that's why it was really important to bring those in. While I always like to share those stats, but you can see it went down by half. And why did that happen? Because we dedicated a substantial amount of time, really, over the course of a long period of time to deal with a very few amount of individuals to help them get over that hump. And we were bringing them less to the hospital as a result because we knew later we were going to get a call. Now, with individuals who are, say they're like, they're trafficking drugs or they're causing like a lot of harm in the community, when we have the ability to target them, yes, like we will get more charges, but we'll have a safer community. So the perfect example is in larger centers where in Kelowna, for example, we had 2 individuals that were stealing hundreds of cars per year. We don't have that problem in Sooke, but this is kind of an example. They created a target team to target those individuals, and our stolen car stats went down by 90%. So, and they have the resources to be fluid with how they target. Like, they had a very successful one with stolen bikes. So the amount of stolen bikes went down because they were going to these chop shops and that sort of thing. And they specifically targeted those people. And yes, the crime stats did go up because they charged a group of people, but it made the community safer. And
thank you. Any other questions from council members? Go ahead, Councillor Pearson and Meadows.
Thank you. And thank you for the last couple of slides there. It's interesting when you start doing the math, like 30 times 2 hours is 60. That's a week and a half for an officer. And then if it goes to 10 hours, it's 300 hours or 7.5 weeks for one officer out of a 12-week period. That's pretty amazing. My question actually is, you ever thought about bike patrols? I know in some communities I see bikes roaring around the downtown, and it seems to have a real positive impact in the community. People see people going by, or officers going by on bikes, but they're also targeting certain segments of the community, and it gives that sort of overall sense. So just a question. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Councillor Pearson. And to your first point, when we have our GIS section, they're the ones that are going to deal with those higher time, more serious type of files. I worked on major crime for a number of years, and there was one file in particular that for a year, that's what I spent I would say about 70 to 80% of my time on. So if you add up all the hours during a year for an officer to be working, I'm dedicated to that one file. Saying that, it was very serious and it deserved that type of commitment, not to mention all the court that I had after. But yeah, one file it could be, it could take a lot of time to deal with, but it takes a lot of time to deal with based off the severity and the need of that. We wouldn't do that on a investigation that doesn't warrant that. But when there's something more serious or something more technical, then it does require that. Now, I could have 5 officers maybe working on that file, so it wouldn't drain one officer for potentially 3 weeks just dealing with that one thing amongst their other stuff. Maybe it's only 5 officers for a few shifts, but still it's a lot. And to your question was, yes, I'm very familiar with the bike patrol program. It's wonderful because it shows a lot of officer visibility, and it's just very successful in terms of, like, enforcing bylaws, and enforcing motor vehicle act, enforcing criminal code offenses, and that sort of thing. Typically, bike patrols are common for when you have a downtown core. So typically, or you have a larger population density in one area, because that is, while it's good to have that visibility, that is also very targeted, because you're in a certain area that maybe be a quote unquote high crime area for whatever reason, and you have officers that are outside of cars, and they're there and they're enforcing a number of enforcing a number of statutes. We had that at one of my old detachments every summer. There was, half a dozen bike patrol officers that would be downtown Kelowna every single summer. It was a great program, and it helped really clean up the downtown area and make it more vibrant. But in the absence of really having that, it's not, in a smaller place, it's not always the best use of resources, but it's a program that I'm a big fan of.
Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I'd like to relate a problem. We talked earlier about 911 and what's an emergency call, what's not an emergency call. But last Tuesday at 6:30 in the morning, my wife and I were driving into town. She had a medical appointment, and we came across by the sewer road there down to our plant, a deer that had been hit in the middle of the road, sitting there in the middle of the road. And so Jane immediately I have to swerve to miss it. And she phoned 911 and got the operator. And the operator says it's not an emergency and would not even transfer us to a non-emergency number or give us the phone number. The person said, look it up online. So my wife, an ex-911 operator, was kind of aghast with that, because you said at certain times it's operated by somebody in the office. 6:30 in the morning, it wouldn't be one of your people in the office. And it was very disturbing that she had to go online and get the non-emergency line. And it was probably talking to the person that was sitting right beside the original person. And just on our way back through town, we saw that same spot, and there was a blood path down the road. So somebody obviously hit it. I only say that because, first of all, it was very disturbing to us. But you might have an opportunity in your course of your business to relate that story to the 911 people. That was to me, it was a very dangerous situation. The deer is sad enough, but if somebody come along in a small car and this thing's down low, it's just going to go underneath the car and cause a terrible accident. So I just wanted to relate that story that you could pass on. But the other part, I'm very pleased with the amount of work that's getting done by the police officers in this town. Bravo, you're doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, thanks very much for that report. The education continues, and that was really in-depth. And I was just wondering, on the day when the perfect storm of priority 1 matters come forward, I guess you play it as what happens on those perfect storm days?
That's a good question. My answer is always it depends. But to give you an idea, like, because we are growing and we have watch commanders and we have very experienced police officers here, which has really been such a blessing, because they know exactly what to do. When that perfect storm does happen, they've encountered that storm before. Maybe a different storm, but they've encountered that storm before, and we know how to prioritize things. If worse comes to worse and there's an absolute priority, like public safety type of call, you know, it does say RCMP here on my patch, and we can call other officers in. You know, there's no, in cases such as that, there's no borders. I've gone to help other officers, and officers have come to help me from other detachments. We do that because it's the right thing to do, and we do that because it's a public safety issue. Saying that, typically what happens in those perfect storm scenarios is we just have a lot of high priority calls, and we are able to manage those. It's just a matter of, you know, they often, we don't, for example, if we had 5 of them, they won't all come at, you know, 4:03, as I'm knocking on wood here. Typically they might come within that hour, or maybe 2 hours, or maybe 3 hours, and then we can deploy different officers to deal with different things. Or if like our dispatchers are able to like speak with the complainant, they often give them safety plans too. It's like, can you get out of the area? Can you get out of the house? I'm giving you updates and officers on the way and that sort of thing. And they're wonderful for that. So short answer to your question is we have very experienced officers. We do know how to triage those. Sometimes they can be very challenging, especially if we don't have enough people on the road, but they do get triaged one way or another.
Couple more short questions. Coffee with a cop. Yeah, you're going to do that again, I think.
Very timely, actually. So we were looking at a date in January, and I was actually going to reach out later this week.
Okay, excellent. And I was just, you know, I Googled RCMP Sooke and looked at there seemed to be 3 key newsworthy stories. There was hateful graffiti, there was youth violence at Broomhill Park, and then there was a major drug bust in March with Holmes and Duncan and Sooke. So of those 3, I was curious about the youth violence, because some of the comments that emerged, you know, that we had this crisis with delinquent youth running rampant in the community. So looking at that Broomhill Park incident, can you speak to that at all?
I can't, but what I can say is I'm familiar with it, and what I can say unequivocally is Sooke is very safe. When it comes to youth, it is imperative and so important for the police to be close to the youth in their community. That includes, you know, playing floor hockey with them, or basketball, or at the end of the day, just going to the schools and being there in the school. But also they have consistency, because one of the problems we have when, for example, if we don't have like a school resource officer, is that I may go into the school one day and I may have good conversations with the kids. But then I can't go there for a while, but then there's another officer that goes, and another officer, and that's all good. Like we're spending time in the school, and I love that, but they don't get to develop those real relationships, because some youth who are disadvantaged, maybe they don't have those stable relationships at home. Maybe they don't have those outlets. Maybe an officer, their school resource officer, is the only person that they can talk to. And maybe, and just maybe, having that resource officer prevents them from getting into a gang. So it's so important to build those up, and the best way we can do it is to be in the schools as much as we can. But one individual, like maybe one school resource officer, hopefully one day in the future, can be in there and setting up those relationships.
And getting the mobile youth services team properly funded and expanded is pretty critical too. Thanks for your report.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time with us today, and we wish you and everyone well, and please pass on our warm regards and appreciation. We'll see you at Remembrance Day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, council, we're just going to go through the remaining items that we have on today's agenda. So I'm going to go back into correspondence under 7.2. It's a letter from the acting deputy minister. It's just, these are follow-up meetings, or follow-up letters following UBCM and our meetings that we've had. And I've been pulling them mainly just to shine a light that we've been doing this advocacy work. The files do not always belong with Sooke municipality, but with our community partners. And so at this point, I'm just going to look for motions to receive. Okay, so motion to receive, please, by Beddoes and seconded by Bateman. All those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Next up is from Minister of Housing. This was advocacy around shelter beds. And again, it's just same sort of thing, but thanking us for our time, reminding us we're an interregnum. And there's a contact, but motion to receive, please, by Beddoes and seconded by Bateman. All in favor, it's carried unanimously. This came from the RCMP around recruiting update, of which we got a more local update, so they tie in together. So another motion to receive, please, by Beddoes, seconded by Bateman. All those in favor, please, and that's unanimous. Thank you. And then 7.5 is, I'll turn it over to Councillor Bateman for this letter that he's pulled.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this out. It was a substantial letter from Ms. Strongwind, and I thought this has been a long meeting. This is the matters she raises are worth discussing at some length. As we've discussed in the strat plan, there are a couple of really key points around the MOU and its revision. I think the district already is doing quite a few things. We had an all staff day with council a couple of weeks ago at the Prestige, and there was a substantial part of that day was dedicated to Elder Hanson and Tree Black were there to tell us about on themes of unlearning, relearning, and the importance of culturally safe community. And just as the mayor has spoken about the ways in which land guardians are being brought into district land use decision making, cultural competency training happening at the CRD. I think we've all perhaps had opportunities or done this cultural competency training. So really, I don't have much to say here other than her key point in a follow-up email involved a UBCM grant that the district could potentially apply for. So I'd like to make a motion arising from this, if I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that the District of Sooke consider an application, and I'm sorry I didn't write this out for you, to the UBCM's Urban Communities Partnering for Reconciliation pilot program.
Perhaps could you frame it that council directs staff
Sure.
to report on the possibility of applying for? So
Yes.
then our staff can take that away and then say, okay, and then because once we get up there and we'll second it, maybe then I'll speak a bit more to
Yeah.
it. So Councillor Bateman has moved it, Councillor Pearson is seconding. The grants come available, but are they, and I haven't looked at this one, so I think it's the case of have staff take it away, look into it, where would it align, and then they could come back. Because some of the grants that have been available for, we spent time for, and we're not eligible for them for various different reasons.
Right.
So let's just get that in before, and we understand where it fits with the priorities and everything else. I'm not saying it's not important, but just.
No,
where it
and the
fits.
deadline for that is end of June next year.
Okay.
So there's quite a large window there, but it can
Okay.
give up to $18,000, I think.
But
for
council directs staff to
contract.
council directs staff to prepare a report to apply for the Urban Communities Partner for Reconciliation Grant Program for council's community.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded by Pearson. So anything else on the motion? We'll call the question. All in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item that was pulled was 7.6 Sooke bylaw regulations requested by Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, and this. So through you, your worship, to the CAO, do you have any comments on this particular letter at this point?
Through your worship, I don't have any comments on this specific letter. I don't know if Ms. Bagwell might know some details on this, but I would anticipate with a letter like this, we would be getting back to the letter writer with a response. I don't know if a response has been set yet.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. While staff don't frequently comment on active enforcement files, this does raise questions from the member of the public about a broader topic. And so I'll speak to that in particular. The district is having internal coordinating meetings on how to address the changes to the requirements among Airbnbs. So while we're working to have enhanced communication out to the public in regards to what the requirements are to have legal Airbnbs, while we're working at making that an enhanced version and more available to the public. At this time, we are rerouting any complaints based to the provincial portal, as the provincial government has set up a compliance mechanism at their level. Staff is also looking into potential municipal enforcement as well, but we would like to complement the province's function and not make it redundant. So more to come, certainly, and we do acknowledge the requirement at a district level to have enhanced communications.
Okay, and there were two other points the correspondent raised. One was noise issues created by a new set of water circulating pumps, quote unquote. And also the neighbor's construction of a concrete driveway and the installation of steel posts on what he claims or says is District of Sooke Road frontage.
So I'll just capture that the corporate officer cannot comment
No, I got
around
it.
the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's where the response was what our officer was able to comment on. So I think the rest would just need to remain
Right.
with bylaw.
And my final question then becomes, when we see letters of this kind in a correspondence package, can we rest assured that staff are also seeing these letters and will be acting upon them? Or does it require me or others to pull this correspondence?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think this goes to the broader correspondence policy that will be coming to provide clarification. But often in my anecdotal experience, when correspondence is sent to mayor and council, it is often a file that staff has already seen. And in the preparation of the information package, it is something that staff reviews. Either myself or the deputy corporate officer does review the package and ensures that internal stakeholders obtain the information as well. I do appreciate that that process can be more streamlined, and we're working towards that. But the status quo has been as such, where if council has questions on a piece of correspondence, this is the venue to ask about that. Absolutely, but we do flag it internally.
Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, actually, I was going to flag this correspondence as well, but Councillor Bateman in his usual fashion beat me to it, which is very nice. But I guess for me, my concern, because I was called by this individual a year and a half to 2 years ago for the same problem. And I went down to see him, showed me what it was. So it's a little discerning to me that a year and a half to 2 years later that we're still dealing with the problem. It hasn't been resolved. So how do we follow up on that? Do I just come and talk to you personally and saying, you know, what's going on here and give me an update? Or is it something that it's not good for a counselor to poke his nose into? Or it's one of my constituents, and he called me up and I went down to see him. So, I mean, it's important to me.
Thank you for the excellent question. Through the mayor to council. If council were to have a particular question about an active enforcement, that would be a discussion at an in-camera meeting where we can provide an analysis of any particular enforcement files. Of course, just quick questions can be directed through the CAO, who can provide you with responses of just to help your curiosity. But if it were something of council's interest and council would like either a legal opinion or a substantial opportunity to deliberate and make a decision about an active file, that would be an in-camera meeting discussion.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so for now, I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Moved by I'll go with Counselor Bateman and seconded by St. Pierre. All those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And now I'll look for a motion to adjourn the open meeting so that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to the following subsection of the community charter, the time being 4:18:91E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and 91M, a matter that under another enactment is such that the public may be excluded from the meeting. So if I could look for a mover by St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Pearson, all those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, so thank you to the members of the public for attending and to staff who presented today. We'll just wait a few minutes and then we'll reconvene with the closed portion of the meeting.